Okay, we're all set.
Great. Okay. Well, again, welcome. So we're going to start off tonight with a review by Laura Dodge, the president of Excel Environmental Resources, the independent monitor who's working with the community on the oversight of the 250 Water Street Brownfield Cleanup Program. And Laura, take it away whenever you're ready.
Yes, I know you have a lot to go over tonight, so I'll just give you an update. I know there's been some notifications to the community regarding the work, but they did complete the 4 piles on Saturday. I spoke to Langen, and Langen did post late this afternoon the daily field reports for Friday, the 13th of May, and Saturday, the 14th. So they are completed now with the pile installation.
Okay, Laura, can I ask you, I'm getting texts that people are having trouble getting in, Diana, so I do want to make sure we have people who want to be here.
Sure.
So let's just make
I'll
sure
hold.
I saw this from Colleen Robertson. Colleen, did you get in? Are you?
And Alice, I had a friend text me the same thing. They said, could you send me another link? Is there another way to get in? They were having trouble. And I had trouble. There was a delay getting the video to work.
Well, we have 46 attendees. I see.
Yeah, it's working on our end. I could always recommend, they try logging on from a different device, whether it's their phone or a tablet or another computer. The link is working. So the one that's on live.mcb1.nyc is the one that I logged in on. So I know it's active and working.
Yeah, it seems to be that the
It
people
might be on the WebEx end. It's hard to say, but the meeting is up, it's running, it's working. So
we're good to go. Okay, Laura, I got the go ahead from people who are now getting on. So thanks all.
Oh, okay. All right. So I know that there's been some general notifications of the work that were issued by Howard Hughes so that everyone knew that it was starting and generally speaking what was going on. But to give you an update as to exactly where they are, they finished the 4th pile for the first pile cap for the building foundation this past Saturday. Then they are starting tomorrow with excavation of soil surrounding that pile cap area, going down to a depth of about 10 feet. Then that soil is going to be loaded into trucks, and the idea is that the trucks will go directly off-site. They anticipate having 4 trucks running tomorrow so that you're aware of that. They hope to get 8 loads out. Some of that soil disposal might continue into Wednesday. Following that activity, they're going to be installing the sheet piles. And the sheet piles are going to go down starting at a depth of 10 feet, which is the base of their excavation. So it'll be below, generally speaking, where the debris is. So hopefully those should go in smoothly. They are going to be driven piles, though, so people are aware. So there will be noise associated with those. There's really no other way you can get a sheet pile in the ground without making noise. It is an activity that will generate noise, just so you're aware. But hopefully it'll just be the 1/2 day, if not a full day, to get those in. And then once that work is completed, then they'll be excavating down another 10 feet in order to set the forms for the pile cap, which will be installed following the forms being completed. Chances are the concrete work would start sometime early part of next week. So it'll take them the rest of this week to do all the work that I just described and get the forms for the pile cap installed. During the deeper part of the excavation, there'll be some dewatering involved. The containers that you see on site now are not groundwater for dewatering. They are water that's coming off of the city water off the hydrant to use to advance the piles. So the water does come in contact with soil, but at deep depths, not necessarily just in the historic fill or the shallower material. The piles are down between 80 and 85 feet below grade. So that's the muddiness that you're seeing is soil that's being picked up at depth and coming up in the water that's being recirculated. We did not anticipate that those containers would be open. We did anticipate they would be closed. My understanding is that they were supposed to be tarped at a minimum. So I've asked Langen to take a look at that. I spoke to Paul McMahon today. I don't have an update yet from him, but he is looking into that. So then the work with the pouring of the concrete will continue. And then the area surrounding the pile cap will be backfilled. That they expect that the backfilling will take place the week after Memorial Day weekend. So at this point, with everything going the pace that it's going, they hope to be done by Friday, June 3rd, if not into the week of June 6th, and definitely done by the 15th of June, which is their drop dead date, if you will. So that's an overview of basically the schedule right now. They that the Mercury hotspot excavation will not start until after schools are out on June 27th. They don't have a schedule yet for the start and the duration of that Mercury hotspot excavation activities. I've asked for it. They're working on it. As soon as we get it, then I'll let CB1 know. But it will be after school is out, for the year. So no earlier than June 27th, likely maybe a few days after that. I'm not sure exactly. So there were the daily field reports and air monitoring data posted on the 250bcp.com website. There were some detections on the J405 in the camp units during the first day when, periodically during the soil borings, but most notably on May 11th, the day that they started to peel up the asphalt in the 40 by 40 foot square area in the corner of Water Street and Beekman, where that first pile cluster is going, or actually has gone in already. And I know that we have some questions likely that will come from the residents and the community members at large. The action level, which is the 15-minute daily average, maximum daily average for mercury vapor, was not exceeded on May 11th, but it did come up to 0.9 micrograms per cubic meter, the action level being 1. And that's the closest we've seen it come since the project has started, other than a day or two where they had some anomalous readings that were taken in and used in the daily average, even though they had to flag it and say that they didn't feel that these were values that were real. The May 11th data for the PM1, which is the camp unit nearest the work zone, was not flagged with any anomalous readings. So I did speak to Langan about the data, and I'd be happy to answer any questions related to that or any of the other concerns. I know there were some concerns about noise. Rather than getting into it prospectively, I'll just be prepared to answer any questions that you might have. So I think
Thanks
that
a lot, Laura.
Mhm.
I seem to have some feedback, but okay. Okay, so first the committee members and community board 1 members, are there any questions? Paul Goldstein.
Hi there.
Hi.
Couple of questions. I'm sure other people will ask more questions about the mercury, so I'll defer on that.
Mhm.
As far as those piles that have to be driven, I know in the past, such as around PS 234 and in other places, they were able to use methods that were less noisy, such as sort of screwing in the piles. Why is that not being done here, or is it under consideration?
I'm not really certain as to, I know that the plan that they have for noise mitigation was designed, for the project as a whole to use equipment and materials and approaches to mitigate noise. That was the plan. My understanding for these sheet piles, though, is that they are going to be driven. Whether or not there's a method that could be used in this particular application that as you're describing, I'm not sure, but I would imagine it's because it's a relatively small area that they're driving these piles in. I'm not sure they have a lot of room to use any other technique. I can definitely find out and get back to CB1 for you. That work is not going to start right away. They still have to do the excavation to get down to 10 feet before they start driving the piles. So at least we have a few days to address it and ask the question.
Okay, that would be appreciated.
Yep.
And then number 2, regarding those bins of water that
Yeah.
are not being properly covered. You said you mentioned it to them. I mean, is that the best you could do? Can't you really press them on that?
Um, yes, I mean, I think the concern is, the dewatering and treatment and collection of groundwater that we know is impacted with, different volatile organics that are migrating onto the site for the most part, and then also migrating off the site. That activity was definitely to be containerized in a closed top tank. That was what we had talked about going into the project. And DEC and Langen both confirmed that that would be a closed top tank and that there would not be therefore any air quality issue related to it. These tanks are related to the drilling, not to the dewatering. So they're not containerizing contaminated groundwater. They're containerizing water that's out of the hydrant, so it's clean potable water that's going down the hole to facilitate the piles being installed. So it's a little different. I would, and I think they are supposed to be covered for safety purposes. And I definitely did speak to Langen today. And after this, call and get everybody else's comments in. I did, Paul McMahon from Langen felt that they should be covered. It was his understanding that they were covered. They were being covered. So the fact that they're not necessarily complying with that is definitely a follow-up item, for us to be able to push, with Langen and whoever else we need to do it with.
Can I ask, is anyone from Langen or HHC on the call tonight? Okay.
And just one more thing, when does that pile driving start? Later this week, did you say?
Let me just check my notes. Let's see. Yes. It will start later this week, Wednesday or Thursday. So we don't have a lot of time to intervene, but we can definitely do everything we can to ask the questions and find out. But the noise mitigation plan is in place. So to the extent that we can find out more information about what methods are supposed to be using to mitigate noise. I know that's one of the concerns that have been raised by the community and by PEC-SLIP. Are the methods that are in place actually noise mitigating to the extent possible? That's one of the questions that we'll pursue.
Okay, I'll let
Answers to. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yep.
Paul. Wendy Chapman.
No, I'm okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Are there any other members of the committee or the board that want to ask a question? Don't see any hands up, so I'm going to move to the attendees. So Maggie Sienna, thanks for coming, Maggie. The principal of the PEC-SLIP school is with us. Can you unmute? There we go.
Ooh, so I'm feeling really concerned about the pile driving coming so soon and the fact that it's just being described as something that's going to be really noisy for a half a day or a day, or who knows, as long as it takes. Today, I was finally able to read a news article from 2005 about the mitigation, noise mitigation that was negotiated with Alan Gerson and the developer who developed the lot across the street from PS 234. And it was significant. And it included, I don't know what the proper term is, I don't have the article in front of me right now, but it included shrouding or covering the pile driver so it muffled the noise. And it included using a technique or a machine that isn't typical and that was less noisy. I've heard nothing from HHC or anyone saying that anything is being done to mitigate the noise of the pile driving. We have more state tests coming up. We have testing next Tuesday with makeup tests on Wednesday. State tests are untimed right now, so I can't say we'll be done at 10:30 in the morning. There's going to be another state, this is the science test is a two-part test. So this will be the first part of the test. The second part is a written test. I don't have the date that that's going to be administered. But you know, every day of school counts. And I did have a teacher report that on Friday at about 12:45, it was the noise that was taking place was loud enough to significantly disrupt the read aloud she was doing in her classroom, and that the floor was shaking. So that makes me nervous. I don't have to tell you that it's been a really rough couple of years, and that we're doing the best we can to keep the kids caught up. And I'm worried. And I'm feeling that I'm glad to be here tonight. Members of my PTA reminded me that this is coming up, and so I'm glad to be here and to speak on behalf of the school and the community. But I'm also concerned that we haven't had a working group meeting in quite a while. The last one, if I have the date correct, was April 5th. And we're about 6 weeks off from that, and the work's starting now. I think it is going to be important to talk, and I need help. So I need help from our elected officials to let's get an agreement together, because that hasn't happened. We did have an election, between the planning of this and things happening now. So I'm looking forward to working with Councilmember Marte. I'm also, I am looking for support in reading the daily reports. I can't read and interpret them. I just don't have either the time nor the expertise. I don't know what I'm looking at. So I'm looking for some support in looking at that. And like I said, feeling quite worried.
Well, Maggie, if I can just say, first of all, thank you very much for coming forward and letting us know your concerns, which are, to say the least, understandable. And we'll do our best to follow up with Councilmember Marte, who is here tonight, to really push forward on the timing of these unfortunate moments that are, overlapping with the school testing. It should not happen that way. We really do have to be really vigilant. Not to allow that there's an overlap with the times of these tests and such. I'm going to let Laura, and I just want to also speak to the working group. We are well aware of the fact that we have not had this working group and are hard at work at trying to make it happen. And we've been promised, I think, Diana, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was June 3rd or June 6th as two potential dates. So we're well aware of the need for that, and are hopefully going to get the date sooner than later, like this week. So I can answer to those two concerns. And then Laura, maybe you want to talk about helping the school and Maggie with the reading of these reports and such.
Well, first of all, I wanted to address the timing issue, Maggie. The next week they should be concentrating on, form construction and pouring concrete. So the noise related to the driving of the sheet piles would be just this Wednesday. Hopefully they'll, and Langen indicated they anticipate that to be about a half a day, and they start at around 7 a.m. So assuming all goes well, it'll just be this one Wednesday, hopefully not at all into next week. And I know that's not the end of noise, but that will be the end of that one activity, which is anticipated to be, a little bit louder than other activities. With respect to the daily air monitoring reports, so every day they're posted for the preceding day's activities, and they are full of a lot of information. And I think that there's a number of things we could potentially do to help you interpret, and maybe one of the things that maybe makes the most sense is for me to come in and meet with whomever wants to meet personally, so I can just walk you through, basically what to look for, what, you should be focused on, what is and isn't, the heart of what's being relayed. But each report does, specifically address whenever there's, an anomaly meaning something happened in the field that they didn't think was a real air quality concern, or when they're actually seeing, concentrations that are approaching, the action level, whether it be for mercury, which is the 1 microgram per cubic meter, volatile organics, which is the 5, or dust particulates was 100 or 150 micrograms per cubic meter. Those are the bright lines. Those are the things that would be action is now going to have to be taken in terms of work stopping, evaluating whether or not there's a source that can contribute or explain, what they're seeing, or if those levels are going to be, they shut down, they go back down to normal, they start work, and then they start to rise again. Those are the time frames, and those are the situations that we're all looking for. The other thing we're looking for is best management practices. And I can go through with you what that would include. So let's say they do have a situation where the action level is reached and they shut down, then they need to evaluate, do they need to do anything differently in the field? Do they need to use, the Mercon X, which is the mercury vapor suppressant? Do they need to use an odor suppressant if there's a petroleum odor? Things of that nature. Noise is a whole different set of concerns, and I know that directly affects the schools and is a concern for everybody in the area, and we can talk more about that, but that's not regulated by DEC and DOH. It is regulated by the city, and there is noise monitoring consultant involved on the contractor side, and they are doing vibration monitoring, which is directly related to noise. And to date, they have not had any vibration action level exceedances. But there's still some concern, I think, that I would like to look further into in terms of how they're correlating vibration and noise. But I can definitely, try to work it in where I can sit down with you and whoever else might be interested in it. But I need, to be authorized to be able to do that. But we might be able to couple that up with, something else. Like, let's say the next 250 Water Street Working Group meeting. If I'm authorized to participate in that, maybe I can come into the city and we can take it in the same location. Because I think to the extent to which you're comfortable with reading those is really extremely valuable. And that goes for everybody, in terms of how you actually go through and look at it. Because there's a lot of information in there, and it can definitely get, hard for a layperson to read through it and pick out what they really want to be, getting out of it. And it's important to also understand, how the monitoring data is interpreted and how it should be applied.
Thanks, Laura. Is that sufficient, Maggie, or did you want to have a follow-up on that? Okay. I know Megan Melbourne, who represents Children First, is here and took the time to put together a very helpful letter, which I know Laura Dodge and Community Board 1 has received, and I imagine others, to talk about some of the concerns, including the open contaminated water that's been discussed, dedicating air monitors at the construction fence near Peck Slip in the Blue School, the 24-hour hotline, which is promised, a dedicated noise monitor at the school, which we've just talked about, maximum decibel levels within the school at 50 decibel level, emergency alert system, the current limited scope of work allowance, and a few other items, which we're definitely going to take up. So I see Megan's on. So Megan, if you want to fill in anything
Alice,
there,
I got
ask
a
a
message
question.
from Maggie Sienna that she did want to respond, but she was
okay.
stuck on mute. So I'm going to unmute
Okay.
Maggie so she can follow up.
Sorry, Maggie. Thanks.
Yeah, I raised my hand again, but I wasn't able to unmute. I mean, I want to say thank you, Laura. I appreciate that, but I can't read daily reports. I have a building full of people who have full-time jobs, so I mean, it'll probably be useful to just get an idea of what all those things mean. But I guess I'm trying to find like who in the community can support the school, and I guess I could say the schools. I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't have enough time to do the things that I need to do right now without
Right.
overseeing this project.
Right. And I, our work scope is very focused, you know, because there's obviously only, you know, so much time that we can spend in terms of like doing a daily review and a daily report would be probably unreasonable and you know, would be costly. I mean, not to say that it couldn't be done, but maybe there's another solution. Let me give it some thought to figure out what makes the most sense. I mean, try to figure out what, is anyone from the Blue School on the call? Do they have the same request? I don't know if Tom Facillo is on the call or not. I don't see his name.
Let's make sure we follow up with that really critical point. So
Yeah, I mean, there's a
that's
term,
something.
I mean, I think this really kind of goes to the heart of the issue, because if the camp is being implemented and the daily reports are being generated, it should definitely be useful and informative to the process. Like we've said from the beginning, everything should be data driven. The data are what's key to being informed and being able to understand what the actions then need to be. So this is why we have to kind of focus on the data and the way the action levels are set and how the work is being done and what the best management practices are that are being used. It's all interrelated. So I think to the extent that everybody can read those or that someone is reading them and providing some type of summary, if that's what would help, then we have to figure out a way to be able to try to do that. So, and do it efficiently so that it's not, you know, necessarily the environmental professionals that are doing it, because I think that is going to get very cost prohibitive. Because what Langen's doing already is extremely time consuming. For us to then take it and put it into another format would be, even, you know, on a daily basis, would be, again, another level of time and oversight that, you know, starts to get cumbersome. But we should address it and try to figure something out.
Let's follow up on that, Laura. We can work
Yes.
together with the school, with the schools, and figure out maybe there's a sort of a tutorial we could do or some sort of intervention that's going to solve this problem. And thanks again, Maggie, for bringing it to the attention of the community. Megan, I sort of already introduced you in your letter, and thank you so much on behalf of Children First. Can you unmute Megan? There we go.
You can hear me? Yep. Great. I wanted to know, I wanted to focus on the noise since Maggie just spoke about that for a minute. And we understand that NYSDEC is not a part of that process, but the developer is. And as Maggie pointed out, that there's been real work that was put forward in 2005 that very, very effectively created a program that helped the school. And I think it would behoove us to follow that path. And I also wanted to point out, though, that this idea that the developer is going to do the things that are the best practices to maintain the sound level at a reasonable rate. In the document I shared, and Diana, I don't know if you have access to it, is there's a video when they were breaking up the asphalt. They took a giant backhoe and smashed it into the asphalt over and over and over again at 12:45 on Friday. This is what Maggie and those children experienced. That in no shape or form was anyone trying to do anything except get this thing done and to make as much, they weren't trying to make noise, but what the impact was on the community was absolutely irrelevant. We'd reached out to Ricky Wong at 9 o'clock in the morning, did not hear back from him until after 4 that evening. The 24-hour hotline was not established that they promised they would establish. Ricky was not responsive to Maggie or to Children First about the noise. And clearly, if you can see this video, you will see that there is no effort done to try to help these children stay focused and be attentive at school at the end of 2 years of COVID disruption. That's just one of the points in the letter. The other things that I talked about just before is that the many, many promises that were supposed to have taken place before any of this remediation started hasn't happened. Has the emergency system that that was talked about during the 250 water, I believe in February, has that been checked? Has anyone on CB1 gotten an emergency alert that shows you that you are in the loop and that you will be notified in case of an emergency? I haven't. So I don't know where that is. There's just, it goes on and on, the many things that are missing from what was promised and what is delivered. And I know, Laura, that when you talk about the data is, if you look specifically on the 11th,
Mm-hmm.
we are really flirting with action levels for hours during the day. And the times where there were really high levels, Maggie Dalal has a better handle on the specificity of all these levels that we were talking about.
Right.
But I really want to do this maximum 50 dBs noise, the stuff that was done for 234. The emergency alert system isn't working. And I also want to know about the limited scope of work and the allowances. Who's checking that? How many piles are being done? How big is this project? Who declares that they're following the rules that were set forth about what they were and weren't allowed to do? There's just no follow through. There's no follow up. And the
I'm not sure
community's really worried.
I'm not sure what you mean by the latter in terms of the rest of the
Oh,
pile.
the scope of work that was approved so that Howard Hughes could get an $80 million tax benefit was supposed to be very limited in scope. How do we know, and who is looking to see if that is the only work that's being done? I don't know that. I don't know how we can know that for sure. And then
Yeah.
I did have one very specific question, Laura, about the area that was chosen for this work for the pilings that they're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
I remember at one of the working groups, we were told that area was picked because it represented a spot that was least impacted. It's not within a footprint of a thermometer factory. It's not on top of the gas station, which would have a lot of fumes. The spot that was picked in part because it would have presented the least amount of danger to our community while our kids are still in school. And these levels are not insignificant. They really come close to action levels. And
Yeah.
it's not in an area that was defined as a hotspot. Can you
Yes.
address that?
Yeah, of course. First off, I can't comment on the question about the what Howard Hughes is, approved to do or not. I'm not involved in that in any way. I'm just involved in looking at, the oversight for the environmental conditions. And what I was talking about originally about best management practices is what we're doing now. We're talking about that now. I mean, there's definitely, I think, room for us to comment and ask further questions about things like the excavator and how the excavator was proceeding with removal of the asphalt. I listened to the video. There's definitely, from listening to the video, I don't know how to correlate that to what their noise restrictions are and what their noise management plan is, but that's a question that needs to be asked. I mean, there's no question about that in my mind. We need to find out, is there a better way to do this? It didn't seem from looking at it like it's a great approach. That excavator is a large piece of equipment. There may be other ways for them to be able to remove the asphalt, which is what we should be getting at. Right now they're done with that activity for this phase of work. There would be no more asphalt being removed until the Mercury hotspot work starts at the end of June, early July. So we have time to address it, and I think we definitely should. No doubt about that. So that's what I was talking about in terms of best management practice. I'm not saying that from what we're seeing right now, that necessarily everything that's being used out there is best management practices, but we have room to provide input on it. With respect to the data, that area was selected in part because it was outside of the footprint of areas where mercury impacts were documented that were elevated, outside the footprint of the thermometer factory or the former thermometer factory itself, where the highest concentrations were found, outside of the footprint of the warehouse and the auxiliary structures. And I have looked at all of the data, including the raw data for May 11th and actually for all the preceding days. And I didn't get to it for the 13th and 14th, Friday and Saturday, because it was just posted. And I didn't have time to get through it. I skimmed it, but didn't have time to get through the whole raw data packages since it was just posted at like an hour or two before the call. And I did also speak to Langen about, what they were finding with the J405, specifically at PM1, which is the camp unit closest to the excavation area. So number one, this is definitely a larger area than it's ever been opened up at a time. The test pit excavations were smaller in size. They were 10 feet by a few feet wide. This is a 40 by 40 foot area. So it's not, to me, out of the realm of possibility that the larger area is what in part is contributing to the fact that some detections of mercury vapor are showing up in the monitoring. And I think that there does need to be a close look at how does this translate into what they can expect to see when they do the removal of the asphalt in the mercury hotspot area. And that's what I meant by data-driven. From the beginning of my involvement in the project, we talked about you gather the data and then you use that data to inform how you proceed with the next, part of the work. So starting over in the corner of Beekman and Water, where the soil concentrations for mercury were not elevated and there wasn't any sign of mercury vapor in the void spaces that were investigated there. The test pit that was done over there didn't show anything of concern. That in part was all used to inform that being a good place to start. The J405, as you know, sometimes can get these readings which show up and they can be due to actual mercury. They can be due to something that's interfering with the mercury, with the meter. The J505 being the more sensitive unit, but cannot be wired into the telemetry system. What Langen's doing is they're taking the J405 data, they're doing the calculation of the 15-minute daily maximum average, and then they're also taking their J505 data, which is also a database, and they're providing that raw data along with the 405 data for comparison, and they're looking at it also. So clearly the maximum daily average for mercury vapor as 1 microgram per cubic meter is the point at which you would stop and then take a look at what you're doing. They got 0.9 micrograms per cubic meter daily maximum average on May 11th when they were doing the peeling up of the asphalt. So to me, that means that, we look at that and we need to take it seriously that if we're in an area where there isn't elevated mercury concentrations in soil being reported, this is something that needs to be looked at hard before you move over to the mercury hotspot area. And you need to have a very good understanding of what that data means. And I had this conversation already initially with Langen. I don't think the conversation is done yet. I think that we need to be, they know exactly obviously what the camp and what the remediation work plan says. If they reach and exceed that 1, they've got to stop work and they've got to evaluate what they're doing. The first thing they do is try to look for what's causing it. And I think that's where, the difficulty here is that you've got the 405 data is what we have to rely on because it's the only instrument that can be used in the camp system reliably over the course of a full 8-hour day. You can't put another instrument in there. It's not going to work. The battery won't last. It's not going to be as effective. It's not the best situation in the world, but it's what we've got to work with. The J505
I'm sorry, I'm going to have, yeah.
So I know, Alice, it gets.
No, I mean, we're into an hour and we have 5 hands raised and we have the entire Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency in front of us. So we will have to be conscious of time here. So I'm going to.
Suffice to say, Megan, that we are looking at it really hard and that there does need to be additional discussion about it. The action level wasn't exceeded, but it was approached. And this is, something that we definitely need to look at hard and make sure we understand exactly what's going on and what the actions are that need to be taken. So
on that note, I though would like to request very specifically that there be monitors placed at 2 feet, 3 feet off the ground. We've been asking for this for months outside the fence. The fence is a totally new thing for us. We have no idea how that's affecting what the construction fence that completely rings it. It might be a great thing. It might be remarkably lower on the outside of the fence, but we have no idea what the levels are now on the outside of that fence. And that would be something that we really want as a community, a dedicated monitor outside of Peck, a dedicated monitor outside of Blue School that's at a child's height, because that's where we care and that's where would be inhaling the mercury. That's very specifically one thing that we would like to work on. And I know the CB1 has a huge night ahead of it, but I just want to make sure that that was heard.
They're really important, Megan, and I would like really appreciate the letter. It's extremely helpful, and I have every intention of working with Tammy on a letter to prepare ourselves for this upcoming working group meeting, asking for the very items that you've identified in your letter, including the ones you've mentioned tonight. So we will definitely be following up on that, and I can't thank you
To
enough.
point out one small thing though, is that so the 15-minute increment is what we've decided is how we know if we reach that 1.0 as an action level. If that was a 12-minute or a 6-minute, we would be well over the action level. It just so happens that at this 15-minute interval, we are at the 0.95, 0.93. If this was a 3-minute less window that they were averaging these wafting levels of mercury, we'd be well into a stop action work. And that is really alarming.
Well, I think Laura's addressing that, and
Yeah,
you are following up on that.
Yeah, the 15 minutes is not arbitrary. It's not like we came up with it. It's what's used for air quality monitoring in this kind of an application. But, you know, we, as I indicated, we're looking at the data, you know, very closely, talking about it with Langen, and I think that process will continue. And I also want to point out that per the remediation work plan and the camp that's been approved for the construction remediation, when work is at the property boundary inside the fence, those camp units will be across the street, and they will be set at 3 feet high in front of the schools, on both the Peck Slip and Blue School side, so Water Street and Peck. That is part of the plan. If work is not being done, though, that close to the property boundary, then that's something that we, you know, need to discuss further. If the concern is to have something like that, that would be above and beyond what the camp calls for right now. So, you know, again, this is why this dialogue, you know, should continue. This is one of the reasons for having this meeting and also for having the working group meeting. So thank you for your input.
Thanks very much. So there's another 5 people who have their hands raised that ask that those folks who have got the questions answered in any way to maybe, you know, not ask it again. Let's hear from Lawrence Hong from the Assembly Member's Office. Thanks, Lawrence, for joining us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, great. My name is Lawrence. I'm from the Assemblywoman's office. I'm her chief of staff. I think in the beginning I left my email in the chat as well, but for those of you who don't have it, it's Hong, HONGL as in Lawrence at nyassembly.gov. So basically, I mean, I thank you so much for having me here. I don't have too many comments right now. I've heard a lot from folks about the 24-hour hotline, and last week I did also notice the unresponsiveness of Ricky as well when we got a lot of complaints from parents and school teachers regarding some of the noise. We've submitted, I don't know how many requests, but numerous requests at this point for a reconvening of the meeting, which I know is supposed to happen in the next week or so, or in the next few weeks or so. In that meeting, we want to bring up, at least from our office's end, we want to bring up mostly about the noise mitigation items as well as the air monitoring units that we've been asking for since I God knows when. I mean, it was years at this point. And the inclusion of the emergency notification list, that was kind of like a topic that we had in our previous one. I am happy to take back any of the other concerns from the CB, as well as for anyone from Children's First. I'm sure everyone has my number or my email address at this point. If you have additional concerns from the community that you'd like to see, excuse me, if you'd like to see reflected inside of our office's priorities for this project, please feel free to email them to me as well. I'm always happy to review and send those over to the DC or Howard Hughes or whoever would handle that specific request. Other than that, I appreciate the time. I know you have a very long agenda, so I'll close out from here unless you have any questions or concerns to ask me from the committee.
Thank you, Lawrence, very much. I think you could be really helpful in helping us establish a timeline for these meetings so that we don't have these large hiatuses between them, so that we can address so many of these issues a lot more proactively. So that would be one thing that I'd love to achieve for the, you know, before this alleged June 3rd, June 6th meeting, if we could start to really look forward. And we will provide all of the notes from tonight that definitely have to be addressed at this meeting, including the Children First letter that I assume you have a copy of.
Sure.
Thanks very much. I'm gonna ask Grace Lee to unmute herself. Hi, Grace.
Quickly reiterate that I believe, can you hear me? Okay. I just want to quickly reiterate that I would really love if CBO1 could request that the next stakeholder meeting is done in person. I'm sure that Southbridge Towers would be happy to. I don't want to speak on behalf of Southbridge Towers, but I'm sure we could find a community room close to.
I think we lost Grace, or at least I did.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm sorry, I had something coming through. But if we could just request for the next stakeholder meeting to be in person, I would really appreciate that. And for Laura Dodge to come at minimum, like hybrid style, so that Laura Dodge could also walk through the site with us. I do want to say it seems a little ridiculous that the community needs to be the police on this site when we have a funded state agency that is supposed to be providing oversight on this work. It's totally ridiculous to me that every day, Children First is crunching numbers to determine what is going on in the site, that we have Southbridge residents taking photographs of the parking lot to inform the community on what is happening on that site. So another request that I would like to make is that Laura Dodge's team has a presence on the site, especially during some of the most invasive work. We should ask that of Howard Hughes, and I would really appreciate if we can make that one of the requests going forward.
I know we've spoken to Laura about this, and that's intended. I know that you're trying to negotiate that. So thanks, Grace. That's certainly in the works. And your first request, duly noted for the hybrid meeting. I think it's a great idea. So we'll make it a hybrid. And if Southbridge is willing to offer up their space, all the better. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lauren Goldman.
Everybody hear me?
Yep, thank you.
Hi. Yes, my name is Lauren and I live at 100 Beekman. I overlook the parking lot and I have a almost 3-year-old and an 8-month-old. And I guess my questions and comment really stem from the malfunctions and the errors that are in these reports. To me, I am baffled that the work has continued to take place when these monitors are repeatedly malfunctioning and have or are being reported as having errors throughout the day. I don't understand how the work can't be halted or won't be halted until there can be monitors that are fully functional. I from my understanding, on the 11th, most of the report before 2 p.m. was a malfunction. So how are we getting proper reporting? For me, I knew when I moved into this building and this apartment that it was a risk with the view. That's not my concern. I always knew that. My concern is the safety of this brownfield cleanup and my kids. Brownfield cleanup to me is a safety procedure. And so if the safety mechanisms are the monitors, and as I'm now learning, the tarping of these containers, which haven't taken place, with these two things that are malfunctioning or not taking place, how is the work still ongoing?
Laura, do you want to respond to that? I mean, I guess that's a hard question.
Well, no, I mean, the malfunctioning of these types of monitors is something that we've been talking about pretty much from the beginning. No question that May 11th was whatever could go wrong went wrong on that particular day, but it was the upwind monitors, the monitors that monitor the wind coming onto the site, that were the ones that had the gaps. And I think, you know, I personally think that the Emilcot is the subcontractor that Langen is using for the air monitoring, and they're pretty much industry standard. I mean, almost every firm that I know of, including my own, uses Emilcot as their air monitoring subcontractor. So they're very qualified. But I think that there is room now after the May 11th, especially when there were not just one or two issues, but there were many issues. There was a faulty wire. There was an issue with the telemetry communicating with the server, meaning that the data were not getting, you know, recorded for these two upwind monitors. The monitors that were the most important for the work being done on May 11th were PM1 and PM4. PM1 is the one that was closest to the work area. That one had no issues, no monitoring issues, no faulty issues, no anomalous readings at all. So that data can be used, and that's the data that we're talking about that measured that 0.9 daily maximum 15-minute average. PM4 is the one that was also downwind and fairly close to the work area. That one also had a glitch, but they addressed it. But I think these are definitely conversations that I think need to be relayed to Langen and HHC, so that they have Emilcot do a better job before they move out to the site with this equipment, and check it out much more thoroughly before they initiate the use of it. So there's definitely
Well,
room.
thank you.
There's room for
I guess
improvement
I'm
there.
just sure, but I guess I'm confused as to why this wasn't checked or streamlined in the preliminary work being done. I guess how could this cleanup take place with faulty monitors, and how is, like, I guess how are we not, how are we talking about anything except that right now? Like, I just feel like those are the only things that I have to rely on to know that the air that I'm breathing in 24 hours, 7 days a week, because I look at that parking lot and my kids, that's the only thing I have to rely on. And when I see these reports with numerous bullet points of malfunctions and errors, it feels extremely corrupt.
Yeah, I think again, May 11th, definitely, there's no question there were multiple things that occurred. The data
May
that was
11th is the day where we almost reached the 15-minute
Right.
action law. That's crazy. I could come on a job, and if I had an agenda, I could, you know, I'm speechless, and I don't know how everyone else isn't. Like, this is the biggest, this is the only thing we have to rely on, are these safety mechanisms to alert our community if something is getting into a dangerous place.
Right. Now remember too, though, that they have an air monitor that uses handheld equipment that is the J505 that's used in conjunction with the camps. But the way the work is supposed to proceed, and we're going to ensure that it does proceed going into the larger scale remediation, and that's going to be before they start with the hotspot excavation, which is the area where we know the higher levels of mercury are. We're going to address these concerns, you know, and again, one of the recommendations is going to be to ensure that Emilcot is checking their equipment much more effectively before they bring it to the site. But the actions that Langen are taking in the field are the appropriate actions when they do have an equipment malfunction. If it was in a downwind direction, they're replacing the J505 with the handheld 405, I'm sorry, with the handheld 505. And that data is being recorded as well. And that data is also being reported. But these other issues need to be fixed.
And what about the tarping, which I didn't realize was actually something that should be taking place every day,
right?
And it's not. Again,
Yeah,
why isn't the work stopped until measures and protocol is? I'm so
right.
confused.
Yeah, that I'm looking into and trying to get a response from Langen regarding. They were, not able to give me an immediate response because they were supposed to have been tarped. And we know from going into this work that the dewatering tanks were supposed to be closed top. These are not the dewatering tanks, but in our view, tarping them, if that's what was required, should have been done. And if it's not being done, then that's, inconsistent with the work plan, and we need to call it out.
Okay, I'm gonna, I think the back and forth on this, if
I'm
I
sorry.
could.
But I guess my last question is, who makes the call? Who's the judge that says stop work until promises, protocols are met? Who is that person?
Well, I think it depends on the entity. I mean, it could be DCDOH, it could be the city, it could be Howard Hughes themselves, it could be the community if we want to, get together and make, that request and relay that. That's one of the reasons why I think it's really important right now that we compile all these comments and concerns and we come up with the best path to ensure that we are getting that message across and that action is taken. But again, this activity is sort of like a trial run, if you will. I mean, that's essentially what it is. We're seeing what going from the investigation to the test pits to the fuller scale remediation is going to look like. So there's room for us to, provide the feedback and the concerns and try to get these things addressed before the next phase of work starts at the, late June, early July. So all the more reason for having these continued meetings and dialogue.
Okay, thank you. We have two more folks, and then I'm going to close this out. So Louis and Victoria, please. Louis, if you could give your last name, I don't see that here. And if you're, please don't repeat something that's already been addressed. I'd appreciate it.
Louis Kleiman. Hi, Alice.
Oh, hi.
6:15 this evening, I posted into the chat a quick 2-minute search about silent piling. Anybody can just do it for themselves. I have been involved in various other requirements for piling around the city. I just don't quite understand why the community board does not know about the ability to do quiet type pile driving. And if you don't know, and if you have not been told by the engineers, there's either a definite lack of communication between you and the engineers, and kind of a feeling that perhaps the engineers are really not that much interested in dealing directly with the community requirements. The quietness of the piling is such an obvious community concern. I would have thought it would have been addressed long before this.
Okay, thanks, Louis. It's an important point. And yeah, we certainly are aware of the history here with PS 234, some of us around at that point, and we certainly are having it on our agenda, which, as we have said, hopefully will get aired very, very soon with the working group. These are critical concerns, and you're absolutely right. And thanks for the tip on this. Okay, I think I have Victoria. So next, and I see one other hand up.
Victoria Hillstrom. Look, I understand people, places, and things, and obviously our children and the Mercury are first and foremost. And yet I just got through sending CB1, Seaport Coalition, Richard Corman, Grace Lee, Children's First, a photo of 227 Duffield, a landmark that is essentially going to fall to the ground over pylons and the work that was done in downtown Brooklyn. And when a developer goes down more than 10 grade, John from I'm DOT. I worked with Frank Rubes at 71 North Moore, 385 Greenwich, aka 71 North Moore, over the damage to our lofts on now 37 permits, where we caught the DOB and landmarks falsifying the permits that caused the damage to our loss. Before Howard Hughes goes down 10 grade, they are to survey the surrounding landmarks. And what seems to be happening, although I'm never clear if this is necessarily environmental impact, but we have Gowanus with environmental concerns. We have East River Park with these concerns that I'm really wondering. I also share the same horror. Why hasn't this project been stopped? In our case, Tish James wanted to sue the DOB for falsifying the records. That I am very concerned, given 227 Duffield, Tish James and Jamani Williams are both involved. Our landmarks are being destroyed by the amount of work that is now being done in the seaports. So I can't add it to the chat. I wanted everyone to see a photo from last week where the support beams were just added after the fact. And this is what I'd like to contribute to this conversation, that this is all after the fact. We want this halted. I just wanted to share that with everyone.
Another really important point on preservation, Victoria, I know it's certainly addressed early on when we looked at the Seaport challenges and will be continue to be so. So thanks for bringing it up. I think we have one last person, which is Daniel Robertson, and then we're going to close out this phase. And thank you, everybody, for your input. Daniel?
Hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I gathered maybe you can't hear us.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hmm.
Sorry, I'm having problems hearing you.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Regardless, this is Danny Robertson. I'm a parent of 2 children at Pexlip School, a member of the Pexlip PTA Executive Board, and I just wanted to say a few words about the noise mitigation issues. We've been continually reassured that Howard Hughes was going to schedule and structure its construction and pile driving activities in ways that were not going to impact the school days. And it has an obligation to do that under the governing city regulations. I believe it's the DEP regs, 28101. If there's any work planned near sensitive receptors, the responsible party is required to cooperate with the facility or the operators of the neighboring receptors to coordinate the work schedule to minimize the noise impacts. We've been promised, over and over again that we would be given notice and an opportunity to discuss scheduling with Howard Hughes. This hasn't occurred. They're required to have a construction noise mitigation plan, and we don't have that. I'm not aware of the details of what they are or are not doing. And as we've discussed previously, this is not uncharted territory. This has been done before and done successfully with PS 234. There's absolutely no reason that Howard Hughes shouldn't agree to the same reasonable safeguards, that resulted in a successful construction, there without disruption of the school activities. So we would encourage, more fulsome disclosure about what Howard Hughes proposes to do about construction noise, more dialogue about the scheduling of those pile driving activities so that children's school days are not disrupted, and they have been disrupted. It was a very it was a difficult experience for a lot of people who were at the school this past week. So we would encourage both the board and Howard Hughes to come to the table and work with the stakeholders as part of our working groups. So we can find out what is going on, and the best way to protect the surrounding communities and make sure that there are limited disruptions in accordance with the requirements. And that's all I have.
That-
Thank you for your time.
That's very much, we've addressed that point, and it's absolutely critical. It definitely will be part of this working group. We are definitely going to be providing a letter to Howard Hughes with all of what has been stated tonight so that we don't miss anything at the working group, and hopefully even entertain answers prior. Obviously, Laura Dodge will cover the areas that are part of her purview. I'll certainly let her finish up, but I do see Maggie Delal's hand up again. Did you have something else you wanted to quickly add, or is that just from before, Maggie? I didn't want to, given your position at the school, I didn't want to shortchange you there, but.
Not Maggie Sienna.
I'm sorry. Oh, Maggie, I got the wrong Maggie here. Sorry,
It's confusing.
Maggie.
I get it.
No, I wasn't. Okay, go ahead, Maggie. And then you will be our final voice from the public. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you guys for giving me a chance to speak. And Laura, I'm glad you're on here. I noticed that Maggie Sienna said in the beginning that these reports that come out, and as you said, some of them just came out this evening, are confusing and complicated to read. I spent several hours today with Megan going through them, and it took me, the writing on the reports isn't clear. It isn't great. So it's been difficult to sort of go through all the data. But what I was able to do is make some graphs. And I just wanted, Laura, I feel like you're being really kind to Howard Hughes at this point. The number of mistakes or missteps on this project, this isn't new on May 11th. This has been going on every time we have them do work on the site. There are errors with data. There are errors with data analysis. They're not, Megan went through all the stuff from the hotline. I want to reiterate what Lauren said. Where's the accountability? I feel like the DEC needs to be here. I would love to see you on the site. This is unacceptable that these mistakes continually happen over and over and over. It's not like they uploaded the data wrong. Oh, wait, sorry, they did do that. But it's just on May 11th, 3 of the camp stations were not working. One of them for almost the whole day. Why didn't somebody realize it? Why didn't work get shut down? I quickly pulled up the data while this call was going on for May 13th on Friday. 3 of the stations had errors. And on top of it, of them not following through on promises, there was data. I'm looking at the end of May 13th at Friday, Laura. I know you said you quickly glanced at it. We didn't have time to look at it for the meeting. There's a level of mercury at one point on one of the stations at 6.0. There is mercury at 3 of the stations at the end of the day. Several numbers are approaching and going over action level, and they turned off the monitors. We were told at a working group meeting that this would not happen, that they would leave the monitors on until the levels were back down to 0. And again, who's paying attention to this? How is this happening? It's just unacceptable. And we talk about best management practices. I've talked on the working group meetings about the behavior of mercury. Mercury is 7 times more dense than air. It sits on the ground. And I've asked to have monitors drop to the ground. I've asked to have the handhelds checking data along the ground, because my gut hunch is that the levels are a lot higher. And at 4 or 5 feet off the ground where those camp stations are, we're getting wafts of data. And that's why we don't see these sustained levels of mercury. Diana dropped a picture in the chat or on the screen, and you guys can see this. These levels are really high. So you can see levels are elevated all throughout the day. And this was one of the few the camp monitors that was actually working. And for a 6-minute period, there was levels well over action level with an average of 2.0 and peaking at 5.22. That's not a great level. If we looked, and Megan mentioned this earlier, a 12-minute average would come out over action level. So, questions about best practices, your 15-minute average was based on gases that evaporate and go up in the air. That's not how mercury behaves. And I feel like we need to revisit this at the working group. I think that we need to get more monitors on site. I want to see accountability. They should be checking every one of those camp stations throughout the day against a 505, a handheld, and checking to make sure that the accuracy. We have concerns about the 405 accuracy through this whole project. You guys keep mentioning upwind. That's not how mercury behaves. Mercury travels down along the ground. It's different than dust and VOCs and other chemicals. And even the analysis, just one more thing, even the analysis from Langen has flaws and is misleading. When there was data in February on that Tuesday, there was mercury all over the site and they blamed it on the weather. And I checked with Dr. Carpy, who's a professor who specializes in mercury, and he said that was wrong. So he said that weather can cause mercury to vaporize, especially when it's humid, and you are going to see higher levels. It's not a problem with the equipment. That's accurate data. So I'm beside myself, because what is this community supposed to do when there's no accountability? Every time that there's data that's concerning, as you can see in this chart, the kids are still in school. The whole agreement around all of this was that the kids' work would be done when the kids aren't in school. We thought nobody in the community was concerned about doing work here because these levels shouldn't be this high, and they're high. And someone needs to be there tomorrow. Oh, accountability on this site, monitors in front of those schools, so we know that those kids are safe. It's just unbelievable. Okay, I'm done.
Thanks, Maggie.
Yeah, no, I'll keep
We
this
feel
quick.
Lauren, you want to, you're hearing
Yes.
the community's
And-
concern. Let me just finish, and I'm just going to ask you to briefly summarize, the sort of response to this. Thank you all very much for this input, and go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I mean, I'm not being kind, Maggie. It's more that I'm just trying to be level, because there's work to be done, and I think I've been saying that right from the bat, right off the bat, right from the get-go. The difficulty, I guess, for this call this evening is that we did just get the data, and I don't want to jump to conclusions. It would be irresponsible of me to do that. So I haven't had a chance to look at the 13th and the 14th. But in looking at the data from the 11th and the 12th, I definitely have input that I want to be providing, to Langen and HHC. And I think we do need to definitely have a discussion. One of the variables that no one's mentioned yet on the call tonight is the weather. If you look at the temperatures on the 11th, they were between 60 and 74 degrees, in that range. So it was a warmer day than we've seen in the past as well. And that's another factor that we should just be aware of, especially when taking a look at how all of this is going to be pieced together going forward. The action level is based on the 15-minute average. And I know that this is not to say that looking at these instantaneous readings isn't important, because it is. It's important to inform the overall interpretation of what the data mean. So I'm definitely, immersed in it. You have obviously done the same, and you're looking at trying to, make sense of it. But all of this is interrelated. The monitoring has to be effective. It has to work. If it's not working, they have to take the right steps to act immediately. The J505 is there to double check the camp units around the site, and that is being done. But can things be done differently and better? And can we make recommendations immediately to Langen and HHC to see if we can get some of these concerns addressed? Of course. And that's what I will be doing. And actually, we will be on site tomorrow. I haven't gotten the full scope of work approved yet, but I've taken the liberty to authorize one of my staff to be on site tomorrow morning with the J505 to do an air monitoring quality control check around the entire perimeter, all four sides at all levels: breathing level for an adult, breathing level for a child, ground level, checking all the perimeter, going over to Southbridge Towers, checking the air quality at the intakes, doing all the things that we typically have done in the past, because I was concerned. I wasn't as concerned going into this activity based upon the test pit investigations. But now that we're starting to see, these types of things happen, I think it is worth it, because they're going to be doing soil excavation tomorrow, and they're going to start offloading that soil onto trucks. So I'd also like to be sure that, protocols for trucks and filling the trucks and trucks leaving the site, that all of that is going in accordance with the remediation work plan as well. So, I'm kind of jumping the gun, because typically, we put out the scopes and we get authorization prior to proceeding. But, even if this winds up being at my company's risk, I think that given all the things that we've been talking about, that it is important for us to be on site tomorrow. So we will be on site. And Brian E. Hall, too, is our project scientist who's been involved in the project from the beginning, who knows the site inside and out. Will likely stay on the exterior because that's really where the concern is. And we don't want to interfere with the performance of the work. But we do want to be there to visually inspect and to confirm, air quality around the entire perimeter and to get more firsthand evaluation of the noise. Although, as Alice indicated, noise is not in our area of expertise. It's not something that we do. And I wouldn't want to get into monitoring it and then reporting back to you on it because it's not within our area of expertise. But there is a noise mitigation plan for the project. The contractor has that. So I will be following up with Langen to see whether or not noise, quiet pile driving techniques are part of the plan. That isn't my understanding, but I could be wrong in interpreting what Langen relayed to me. I will make sure that once I do get confirmation on that, I circle back with CB1 so CB1 can inform the community since this work is going to be starting, within the next few days. So we are taking all of this extremely seriously. We'll hope to be able to provide you with good, recommendations and very quickly. So
Well, that's
yeah.
very helpful to hear, Laura, and I look forward to receiving the information as soon as you can provide it to the CB, and we'll post it on our website. It'll also be posted, I assume, on the Brownfield Cleanup Program's website, and we'll of course send it to all the folks that have spoken up tonight. So I just want to thank the community for coming out and speaking up. It's really helpful to hear, exactly what you're thinking and some of the problems that clearly are presenting themselves, and also ideas for solutions. Thank Laura Dodge very much for trying to monitor all of this. It's not an easy job. And thank the next people on the agenda for their patience and all. And we're now going to move on to item 2. And thank you again all to the Lower Manhattan Quarterly Resiliency Update. And I think the kickoff here is Jordan Salinger from the Mayor's Office of Climate Resiliency and Sustainability. I think that's what you're called now. No, something different.
Closer.
We
yes,
can't follow. It used to be recovery. We know it's better now.
It's better now. Yeah, it's Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. But yes, thank you for having us tonight. For those who have not joined for the quarterlies before, the idea here is to give briefer updates across the project area. Tonight, though, we'll be focusing a little bit more on some of the FIDI Seaport work, the work going on in the Battery, as well as the Battery Park City Authority projects. We'll briefly speak to the other projects, but spend a little bit more time on those 3. We're joined by colleagues at EDC, Parks Department, DOT, and our friends at the Battery Park City Authority. Not on the call tonight, but folks that we work very closely on all these projects, DDC, Emergency Management, and our subsurface friends, DEP, helping to make sure all these projects work together. So, I think overall, this is a moment to celebrate some significant progress across these projects. In particular, FIDI Seaport really is a culmination of the prior phase of work, the master plan. We're able to release the kind of final documents, part of that project, and releasing them tonight, actually. We'll be hearing more from the Battery team, talking about, they came, I believe, to this community board back in March to talk about the 75% design milestone. They've continued to advance that work. They'll be providing a little bit more detail there, as well as our friends at BPCA, milestones on their ball fields project. I imagine many of you have seen that, as well as the release of the DEIS last week. So I guess before that, we'll quickly go into a discussion of something the community board has asked, but just looking at some kind of the overall LMCR strategy. Next slide. So you can see here kind of all the projects together, starting on the The right side, below the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, this is what comprises the LMCR portfolio. First piece there, kind of a purplish color, is the BMCR project running from the Brooklyn Bridge up to Montgomery. $522 million, a combination of city capital and federal funds through HUD. This is unique in its use of flip-up barriers, as well as flood walls and kind of other more traditional methods, but it is a little unique in its deployment of those techniques there. As we move down the coastline, the Seaport Coastal Resilience, the newest piece of the suite of projects, $170 million that we have in hand, and applying for additional funds from a few different sources from the federal government to support that work. We continue down, we'll be spending time, you can see there in yellow, talking about Financial District and Seaport Climate Resilience Master Plan. A little different from these other efforts, as it is in the design stage. These others are varying stage, kind of further in design and working towards construction. The Battery Coastal Resilience, $165 million project, led by EDC on behalf of Parks to raise the Esplanade, and we'll be focusing some time later tonight on that, as well as the Battery Park City projects that they'll be going into, roughly $852 million across a couple different projects. Next slide. So just briefly wanted to talk about the design flood elevation. This is something that the community board has asked for before, and wanted to give a sense of how these projects work together. These two pieces here I mentioned, Seaport Coastal Resilience, the newest piece, and the Battery Coastal Resilience are really focused on sea level rise, and particularly at spots where we expect to see sea level rise have impacts the soonest. These are designed to address sea level rise that we expect to face by 2100. So kind of moving outside of the kind of technical jargon here, these are kind of raising the edges about 5 feet from DFE currently of 6 around to around 11. Next slide. So I think I'm not sure if this is the slide we wanted, but there's another one. But at least for now, we can see the kind of 3 pieces of kind of the 100-year storms plus 2050s sea level rise at BMCR, as I mentioned before, the Financial District, and the Battery Park City Coastal Resilience projects. And worth noting that we are actually looking beyond that for that Financial District Climate Resilience Master Plan, given that it is a new asset. These other projects are adapting existing land, if you will. As you'll note, we are looking at extending the shoreline in the Financial District, and so we want to look kind of even further. And so looking at a 100-year storm surge in the year 2100. So if we go to the next slide, I'm not sure if it made it in, but we'll include it. There's a slide that shows kind of all those pieces on top of each other and kind of how they all work together. Just to give a sense here, where we are and where we're headed, the BMCR project, as well as the South Battery Park City project are kind of furthest along. Those are in the midst of soliciting bids, and we'll be moving into construction at the end of the summer or early fall. The pieces trailing behind that, obviously the Battery Coastal Resilience, followed by the Seaport and Battery Park City's North and West projects, all kind of staggered a little bit differently. Some have kind of longer construction periods. Some are kind of a little bit more straightforward projects. So you give us a sense here where we are and where we're headed. Next slide. I think with that, we'll hand it off to Blake to talk through Financial District and Seaport Climate Resilience Master Plan.
Great. Thank you so much, Jordan. Hello, everyone. I'm Blake Monteith. I'm with the Economic Development Corporation's Neighborhood Strategies team, and I help to lead EDC's and the city's work on the Financial District and Seaport Climate Resilience Master Plan. So as Jordan mentioned, we've had some exciting milestones recently, and we have some really exciting work ahead of us. I want to start by touching on our vision for the next phases of work, because we did have a chance a few months ago to share with you an overview of the master plan that we released in December. And then I'll end our segment on just a few updates on recent milestones and then a few upcoming milestones. Next slide. So first, just as a reminder of the overall timeline that we're working towards as part of this project. So as you all know, we spent about 2 years creating the Financial District and Seaport Master Plan, which resulted in a report that we released in December. We've at EDC, along with MOCEJ and all of our agency partners, have been thinking very carefully about the work ahead to make sure that we are really advancing this work in a timely and efficient way, and in a way that allows us to continue to think through the design of this project in a very thorough and thoughtful way, so that we can be responsive to your considerations and considerations from stakeholders across the city. So we are now working towards or stepping into a phase of design where we will be advancing to a 30% level of design for most elements of the project, from the battery to the Brooklyn Bridge. And that will really allow us in 3 years' time to begin environmental review and permitting applications, which are really sort of critical path items that really affect our overall timeline. As we're doing those applications, we would then go into a much more advanced stage of design to finish up the design of this project. And we could anticipate a groundbreaking within the next 5 or so years. And that would overall lead us to a 15 to 20 year time frame to complete all portions of the project. It's likely that some portions of the project would advance before others, but this is our overall goal. And it's also really important as we're doing this work that we're moving quickly and efficiently, as I mentioned, because we don't have an incredible amount of time before sea level rise begins to affect Lower Manhattan. So we really need to take action and work in a coordinated manner. Next slide. Now, first, I want to remind you of what the report that we released in December accomplished, so that we can then build on that and speak to what the next 3 years of work will accomplish. So as a reminder, our report brought the overall design of the master plan to a conceptual level. And that really identified the core pieces of infrastructure, so the flood defense and all of the elements that are really protecting this area, and advance the design of that to approximately a 5 to 10% level of design with some high-level cost estimates. And then I identified some early considerations of many other elements of the project, and identified where there are needs to build those out further or design those further. For example, the Whitehall Ferry Terminal, our drainage system, our tie-ins to the north and south, and much more along the site. We also identified some flexible spaces for future programming, where we could potentially locate playgrounds and community facilities and cafes and things like that. And we'll continue to discuss those opportunities with you moving forward, but that will really come in a much later stage once the design is much more advanced. So we are now beginning a 3-year design process, extending the design that we've already done. We're going to be really focusing on designing and bringing the level of detail of the design as far as we can to advance and begin those environmental review and permitting applications. And so in order for us to do that, we've identified that we will need to design both the raised shoreline structures, all of the solid parts that we talked about that would be higher and that would be extending the shoreline into the East River, as well as the overwater structures, which include our piers and our esplanades and things like that. And that whole system would protect against daily high tides, or would be at an elevation that provides that protection. We'll also advance the design of the tie-ins as well. So the overall structure would be advanced to a 30% preliminary level of design. Given that we have limited funding, we were doing as much as we can with the rest of that funding. And so other elements of the design that maybe were not developed at the same level of detail in the past phases of work would be advanced to a 5 to 10% level of design, which includes our ferry terminals, our pump station, our tie-ins, and much more. As we're doing this work, also very excited to work on multiple site-wide strategies that are really looking at opportunities for us to make sure that all elements of this design are really integrated with the operations and the function that this waterfront needs to achieve, and so that we're helping us meet really important citywide goals. So we're thinking about how we would implement this project, including constructability, cost estimates, phasing, et cetera. We're advancing a really comprehensive maritime strategy, coordinating all of the important maritime assets along this waterfront, along with a stormwater management strategy to ensure that we're integrating and working with the sewer system and reducing the risk of inland flooding, along with energy and sustainability strategies to really make this as a sustainable project as possible, and ensure that any elements of the project that are interacting with established areas of the neighborhood are carefully considered and that their impacts are carefully considered. Next slide. So just building out in a bit more detail over the next 3 years what we would achieve in each year. The first year, which we're calling phase 5, our first 2 years were phases 1 through 4 for context. The first year, we would spend a lot of time making sure that we really have all what we're calling design inputs that we need. Those are technical considerations. That's input from stakeholders, including our community board and elected official partners, and so much more, to make sure that we're setting up the what we're calling the design development or schematic design phase in the second year, and then the preliminary design phase in the third year. And all of this work will be occurring as we did before, with constant and really thoughtful engagement across all stakeholders who really have an interest in this project and this area. Next slide. Great. So as Jordan mentioned earlier today, we also were excited to release a large set of technical appendices, almost 1,000 pages of really detailed information that we could not quite compress into the master plan report in December, but we're really happy to really share all of that with you today. That's located on our website at fidiseaportclimate.nyc. I encourage you to take a look and check it out. You can download it from the homepage there. We're also really exploring and beginning applications for the next phases of work beyond the next 3 years, and applying for federal grants that could really pay for the design of those assets so that we can continue to advance the design forward. Now, as a distinct project, but really did want to mention it, on Seaport Coastal Resilience, we last year applied for BRIC funding, which is a federal grant program. We expect to hear back about that in July. We're also applying for additional HMGP funding, which is also a federal program, and we expect to hear back about that in the spring of 2023. So those will both allow us to really advance the design of the Seaport Coastal Resilience Project even further. And also, for your awareness, we plan to host our next Climate Coalition of Lower Manhattan meeting in July. We will share details about that in the near future. And that is all for the FIDE Seaport team. I will pass it off to the battery team.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Cass from EDC. I'm going to be presenting on our work going on in the battery and some of the other activities happening in the battery besides LMCR as well. So we wanted to start off, we have mentioned this work previously, but we wanted to go into it in a bit more detail. The repair work that needs to be done on the battery wharf ahead of the full wharf reconstruction. So this will be taking place at slips 1 and 2 on the south or eastern end, depending on how you're looking at the wharf itself. This is the area closer to the View restaurant and the East Coast Memorial. So we will have a contractor. Again, EDC is doing this work on behalf of NYC Parks. We will have a contractor performing repairs underneath the wharf to ensure that we have a stable wharf that vessels can operate out of to the Statue of Liberty for the National Park Service. So this work, design work was completed in April, and we're currently in the process of getting permits from SBS. We do have a permit from DEC to cover this work. We've been coordinating with National Park Service and Statue Cruises, as well as the Battery Conservancy on this work. And we're in the process of procuring a contractor to perform the work out there. We expect to start this work later this year, sometime this summer, and wrap it up in early 2023. Go to the next slide. So just a reminder about the Battery Wharf project. I know most of you have seen us present on this many times, but wanted to give an overall summary as a refresher or anyone who's new to the project. EDC is also managing this project on behalf of Parks, and we have received our preliminary approval from PDC in April. Our 75% design was completed in March, and we'll be moving into, we are moving into 100% design and expect to have those documents completed this fall. Again, this is another project, as all projects in the battery, that requires a lot of interagency coordination and stakeholder coordination. In addition to the outreach we've done with the community board, we're constantly reaching out to various stakeholders, including the Battery Conservancy, our partners at BPCA and City DOT, as well as the other parties I just mentioned and many more. We will be coming back to the community board again in June, and we are going to be submitting for our final PDC approval in the summer. And this project is expected to start construction next spring after the wharf repairs are complete. So we wanted to just walk you through the various activities that are going to be happening in the park at the same time. So we have 3 slides that will show the different phases of construction activities. I did want to mention we are showing the construction footprint of these activities. We are still coordinating the staging areas that will be occurring either within the park or in adjacent areas. So we will come back and present that once that's finalized. So you can see this work. There's a little note at the bottom that shows the timeline of each slide. So this work will be from Q3 2022 to Q1 2023. So this is really showing the work that we'll be performing on the wharf repairs that I mentioned earlier. So you can see that highlighted in yellow. There will be a barge in the water. It will be a pretty small operation in the water that primarily will be used to hand materials to the divers. All of this work will be done by hand by divers. And then you can see over on the north side of the site, BPCA's project will also be starting during this period. You can go to the next slide. After that phase, we will be starting the work on the wharf reconstruction. That's the area shown in purple. We're calling that phase 1 because we're doing that work in 2 phases. And concurrent with that work will be continuation of the BPCA South project, as well as some work with that DOT is performing to add resiliency to their underpass ventilation system for the battery underpass. I did want to mention at this point, the vessels for the National Park Service will move over to slips 1 and 2. So you see the outline of the boats there. Those will be at slips 1 and 2, and those operations will be relocated. We also expect the screening facility will be relocated, but we are still working through a final location for that. But in order to reconstruct the footprint of the wharf that you see here, the tent will have to be relocated. And this time frame will be from Q 2023, so spring 2023, until Q 2024. Go to the next slide. And then finally, as we're wrapping up the LMCR battery work, you see that in purple over here on the right. That work will be done in as a second phase. Those pieces, of course, will be tied in together through the construction work. And then by that point, we expect the Battery Park Cities South project to be concluded, and the remainder of the work on the battery underpass by DOT will be taking place. And we expect all of this to conclude by Q4 2024, the end of 2024. That is it for these slides. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, can you hear me okay? I was having some connection issues earlier.
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is Claudia Filomena. I'm Director of Capital Projects, Battery Park City Authority. Thank you for having us as always. We're going to be providing an overview of some updates on our projects. And in response to your request, Alice, we're going to be providing a high-level summary review of our DEIS findings. So with that, I will start with our Ballfields project. So many of you know, this is the first of our 3 resiliency projects that we started. We started this in 2020, and we actually just completed the work in April. Many of you have probably seen it. The trees are now planted along the ball fields, the barrier is up, the sidewalk has been restored. So really exciting that this project is finally complete. During the construction, ball fields were still in use, which was great. We're able to still provide those for the community. And we're really excited to see this finally come to completion. Just as a refresher for those who don't know, this is an interim flood protection measure that will be in place until our Northwest project is completed. Next slide, please. So for our South resiliency, just an overview of some milestones. So as board is aware, we had our final PDC approval for the project on April 11th. We also held 2 construction site tours at the end of April, which we had good participation both from the board and from members of the community. We held those on April 23rd and April 28th. Our DEIS, our draft environmental impact statement, was posted on May 4th. It's on our website. And we have our public hearing coming up this Thursday. Registration for the public hearing, if members of the public would like to speak, is also available on our website. I can also send Diane the link so she can circulate that as well. And our comment period for the DEIS is from May 4th, which is the publication date, through June 3rd. We'll be accepting both public testimony at the hearing on Thursday, but also accepting comments in writing through June 3rd. Next slide, please. So in terms of construction for the project, as Jordan mentioned, we are already in procurement. We expect our construction to start in late 2022 for a duration of 24 months. Right now, our MJH, Museum of Jewish Heritage, for those who are not aware, sorry, I speak in many acronyms, and our Wagner Park site work, that contractor procurement is active, as well as our Wagner Park Pavilion procurement, that is also active. Our phase 2 work, which we consider the Pier A battery and interior drainage package, is expected to be issued in the late spring. So that is currently in progress. We have our 100% drawings. And as I said, project construction completion after a 2-year duration is expected in late summer 2024. Next slide, please. Okay, so to provide an overview just of the impact summary from our draft environmental impact statement. So the categories that we analyzed are here: land use, zoning, public policy, open space, shadows, neighborhood character, natural resources, hazardous materials, water and sewer infrastructure, energy, transportation, air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, noise and vibration, historic and cultural resources, and urban design and visual resources. And as I mentioned, all of this information is further detailed in our EIS, which is available on our website. Next slide, please. As part of the DEIS, we found no significant adverse impacts to the categories listed here. I'm happy to read them out, but land use, open space, shadows, neighborhood character, natural resources, hazardous materials, water and sewer infrastructure, energy, transportation, air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, and noise and vibration. Next slide, please. The 2 areas where we found significant adverse impacts as part of the DEIS are under the categories of historic and cultural resources and urban design and visual resources. For historic and cultural resources, specifically, these impacts are to Wagner Park. Obviously, as many of you know, we are reconstructing Wagner Park to meet the needed design flood elevation. This falls under the State Historic Preservation Act, Section 1409, and the project will result in an adverse impact to the park. We have done consultation with SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, which is required as part of the action. And SHPO has concurred that there are no feasible or prudent alternatives. And we will be working on a letter of resolution with them and working on also potential mitigation measures to mitigate the impact to the park, including doing house documentation, which we're gearing up to do right now, doing some possibility of interpretive panels or historic photos, websites specific to the park, or signage with QR codes that contain the history of the park so people understand what was here before. And for urban design and visual resources, it was determined that there were 2 adverse impacts to existing views of the Hudson River and the Statue of Liberty from Battery Place, but there are no other impacts to any other views or urban design resources. The mitigation of these impacts is that the reconstructed park will allow for new framed and unobstructed views of the Hudson River and Statue of Liberty, and also enhanced northern and southern entries to the park, and also an enhanced pedestrian experience along Battery Place. Next slide, please. So during construction, the following categories, there were no potential adverse construction impacts found: transportation, air quality, hazardous materials, natural resources, socioeconomics, land use, zoning and public policy, neighborhood character, water and sewer infrastructure, energy, and noise and vibration. Next slide, please. So in looking at the construction impacts, so for historic and cultural resources, we are working on construction protection plans for Pier A, the Pier A building, and Castle Clinton, and also doing phase 1B architectural monitoring during construction of Pier A Plaza, the historic bulkhead that is underneath Pier A Plaza, and with our near surface isolation drainage system in the vicinity of West 10th Street, which is also where it intersects with that historic Hudson River bulkhead. For open space, there is a temporary significant adverse impact because of the fact that the following spaces that are listed, portions of the Esplanade, Wagner Park, Pier A Plaza, and then the northernmost section of the Battery and Bikeway will be closed for the 24-month duration. Partial mitigation of these measures is we are going to be rerouting the Bikeway along the northern boundary of the Battery from State Street to West Street, And we'll also relocate all of our programming and events from Wagner Park to other parks and open spaces in Battery Park City as partial mitigation. Next slide, please. That is the summary of our DEIS. Onto our other resiliency project, which is our Northwest Battery Park City Resiliency. As many of you know, we originally had a separate North and West resiliency project. We were granted design build authorization by the state legislature, so we combined them into a combined Northwest progressive design build project. It's a bit of a mouthful. We kicked off the project officially last June. We had our first public meeting in August and a second in December. And in between those two, we had 3 public workshops where we took members of the public along the route and discussed some of the real challenges we're facing along this portion of the Battery Park City waterfront and also along our tie-ins in the city streets. We issued our PDB RFQ in September of last year, and our RFP was issued in January of this year. Our RFP, for those who are interested, along with the short list of firms that we're looking at for this project, are posted on our website. And just in terms of upcoming engagement, we're planning a public open house in June, just to basically come back to the community and talk to them about where we are in the process. It's been a while since December since we've met with anybody and talked about the project. So details of that will be forthcoming. We'll make sure to share that with the board. And we're looking to select our contractor this summer. I believe that is, I'm going to hand this back to Jordan, I think. That was it for our slides, but thank you very much.
Yeah, I think you have some few appendix slides that we can review and send over as well, but just kind of additional questions the community board has had in the past. Just make one more point before general Q&A. I think I mentioned at the top, it's kind of a moment to celebrate progress. It's also a moment of transition for these projects. Moving from renderings and kind of community design, some of these projects now moving towards construction, and so different phase. And I think we should all just be prepared for what that entails. And to be clear, these are infrastructure projects, and many of them are large, and so there will be temporary impacts. And so I think this is a conversation that we're all prepared to have. I know that we've started talking at kind of previous meetings about that, but I think just a recognition that this kind of evolution in kind of the overall LMCR process. I think just the other piece of this is because it's a holistic system, and we showed some slides on kind of how it works together. That it will seem like there's a lot going on. There is. But not necessarily everything is happening exactly at the same time. As I mentioned before, some projects kind of multi-year, others a little bit quicker. Some projects, like the ones, the BMCR moving at the beginning, others like the Battery Park City Northwest project a little bit further down the line. So I think that's just important for us to convey the kind of partnership with not only all the city agencies, but with Battery Park City Authority as we move into this next phase for all of us. And so with that, Alice, I will hand it back over to you.
Okay, well, thank you all very much for the presentations. I imagine there's a lot of questions, but I'm not sure if we're going to be able to address them all tonight. It's kind of an immense amount of information to take in, but we can try to cover a few key questions or concerns or thoughts that people have, or maybe there aren't. I don't see any hands up yet. So are there any questions from the committee or from the community board members?
My hands up,
okay,
Alice.
That's, I was so surprised. Yes, Wendy Chapman, our co-chair. Go ahead, Wendy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the presentation. I always appreciate the updates. They're long, they're very dense. I spent a good bit of the afternoon looking through these presentations ahead of time. And my major comment are the projects that are actually going to start right away. I spent time about a month ago standing next to the beautiful blue painted poles right on the edge of the water in Battery Park. And I asked people that were walking by, do you know what's coming to Wagner Park? And I think this also could be said of the battery construction that's going to be taking place in terms of, the walkway along there. And to a T, the 50 odd people I stopped, not one of them knew what was coming. I'd say that, the vast majority of them lived in the neighborhood. There is a small sign on the top of the blue painted pole with with basically, what the problem is, which is, how high the water is going to be. But there's no clicking to the URL, which is so small above, to say, click here for the problem, or look up the problem, or see what's coming. I have said for more than a year now, that I think there should be sandwich boards. There should be images of this willing. I applaud Battery Park City for putting beautiful images of migrating birds and the bees in the park. Use that template and do the same thing, clip it on the rail in both the Battery and in Wagner Park, so that people that are in the neighborhood can actually see. And I know you've done public engagement. I know this is everybody's chance to do that. But I will just tell you, when people get upset, and they got upset when the governor was trying to put the memorial in Rockefeller Park, as you remember, and they chained themselves in front of the bulldozers, that might happen again. And I don't blame the public for feeling like there's been very little notice on that. And I really think there needs to be a giant banner on the public bathroom saying, here's what's coming, and inviting people to things. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I know you put it in the newspaper. I know you put it on the website, but there is not enough physically in the park that people use every day. So it's my main point.
So this is Gigi from EDC. Hi, Wendy. Thank you for your question. I know that you brought up this concern the last time we were here, and actually between these two meetings, the whole group actually spent over an hour talking about all the different ways that we can do outreach in multiple languages, using existing organizations that outreach to neighbors, including, the moms group, the dog run, the dog group that uses the park on the weekends, and then also thinking about on-site progress update boards and on-site sort of next stage look aheads. So I promise you those are part of the plan. We are kind of working those throughout logistically in terms of, which agency and where and timeline, but those, all of, what you've just raised is being very thoroughly discussed. We even talked about, like, would it make sense to do an augmented reality experience where you could kind of go through the different phases and kind of see it, and we thought that may have been a bit much, so we put all the ideas out there, and there will be both on-site, digital, language, print, all of that is in the works.
And clip to the railing, physically, when you're looking out at the beautiful view, clip to the railing. People will read that.
To the extent that we can attach anything where we're not violating any rules.
There are migrating bird signs right now that are brand new right next to the ferry terminal, and they're beautiful. It's just go next to the ferry terminal in Battery Park and look at the 2 beautiful boards of all the migrating birds. That works, and that's presently installed. Just copy that.
Okay, we're doing another, we do walking tours, routinely. So we will definitely, I will definitely take note of that when we're out next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Alice, could I respond also?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is that Justine? I'm sorry. Was somebody trying to respond to the?
It's Gwen. It's Gwen.
Gwen. Okay, I'm sorry, Gwen. There you go. Yes, certainly. Thanks, Gwen. I assume the earlier response by Gigi was on behalf of EDC and the Battery versus Battery Park City, which you're about to respond to. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, great.
Hi, Wendy, and thank you again for your comments. We have taken the comments to heart, and we want to make sure that we have signage in the park in particular, and I've spent quite a bit of time over the last few days trying to work with the team to get some signage finalized to be installed, as you suggested, in the next few days. And it won't simply be one set of signs, but we see that evolving as we get closer to the construction date. And also we are putting together an informational signage program to employ during construction as well. So we appreciate your suggestion, and we are in the process of implementing some new signage.
Gwen, if I may just jump in on that question that Wendy's brought up. We, in our last meeting, as I know you know, asked for a number of things that were promised to us, the community, and we haven't seen yet. And I'm sort of surprised that we haven't in regard to better communication to the public. And one of them was the access to site models, both large and small models that you have, that we were given, assurance that we would be able to go somewhere in your neighborhood and get to see these. And we were supposed to be given dates. We were supposed to be given a plan showing the pedestrian, bike, and car traffic flow to understand better is exactly what will and won't be available to the public for the next 2 years. And fly-throughs, which I guess is what Gigi was sort of responding to in terms of EDC's, look at this. But where are those particular 3 items that we had discussed? I think it's critical the public does have a better understanding. I think Wendy raises a really good point that I often hear. So we've kind of identified very specific things that seem really useful and very doable, and yet we haven't seen those yet.
I'm surprised to hear that you have not heard any update on the models, because they are now in our facility at 200 Rector. And so they are available. It took a while. They're pretty large and unwieldy. It took a while for us to get them there, but they are there and they are available. So I will make sure that someone sends over all of the information about how people can get to the office where they're currently being held for people to come and see them.
And say where it was again. I'm sorry, you clipped out for a second.
The facility at 200 Rector.
Okay.
In the community room there at 200 Rector, which I know a lot of you are familiar with. If you're not, then we'll make sure that word gets out on how to.
Yeah, to be clear, Gwen, for the record, we did hear that the room was going to be available, but we were never told, or at least I wasn't told, the date and the times that we could enter. That's what it. How about those maps showing the different pedestrian?
I had asked for an update on that as of today, actually, and we are anticipating the receipt of that plan with the map, I think tomorrow. But I will verify that to make sure that that's going to be available for your circulation. The fly-through will be something that we share with the attendees at the DEIS public hearing on Thursday. So we will have those available. We'll have a couple of different ones available at that presentation.
And Gwen, I apologize. This is Wendy. One more thing. How about, I haven't heard anything about kind of the goodbye party for the park being attached to the Swedish festival that we discussed, because I do really think that that could be a good way for the neighborhood to say goodbye to a beautiful park that we've all loved for so many years.
I've understood that that is the that's an opportunity to really take note of the transition of the park, and the send off of the existing form of the park and the new design of the park. And I'm gonna have to ask to get back to you on exactly the form of any promotion of that. That's handled by our parks programming staff, and I am honestly not aware of exactly what the status of that is, but I will find out and let you know tomorrow.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I stop and ask the people that are working in the park, the people that are planting and things like that. And I said, when do you understand that it was going to close? And they look at, they're like, well, we don't know. So I don't know if they actually don't know, or, so everyone's kind of guessing in terms of, could we stretch this? I'm just going to ask out here for the public. Could we stretch the park to be closed when school goes back in session, so that August, the kids can still get on the lawn? And that's my last comment.
Our schedule has been really formulated to make the most use we can of the good weather time for construction. Not to mention just the overall urgency of getting this work started, given the dire need that we have to get these resiliency projects in place. It's also it also allows us, having an earlier start allows us to create more of a staggered time frame between this project and the ones that are coming close behind, and also our Northwest project, which we want to make sure that we are not overlapping to a significant degree, so that there is interference with the public spaces that are involved with both of those projects. So I think that we feel very strongly that we need to move ahead as quickly as we can.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Bob. I just want to just sort of confirm Wendy's point and really underline it, that it is critical that the community has as much information as broadly disseminated visually on the site. I mean, I see you shaking your head going, but it is going to come and backfire, because people are going to be upset when they start to see things that they had no idea were happening. And I know that the authority has done their best to get a lot of news out, but I really agree with Wendy that it should be on the site. You've painted these, markers blue and all. It seems like a perfect opportunity to identify exactly what you're doing when you're doing it. I mean, this is imminent. My understanding is you're starting to break ground in July. We're talking about a month and change. So it's really critical. So I just want to, on behalf of the community, really stress that. And I'm sure, we'll catch up with it all, but that's just an important point. Okay, Bob Schneck.
I just wanted to follow on from Wendy's point. I think that it's real. I agree that the public understanding is really important. I really love the augmented reality, but I've never been able to make that work on my personal equipment. So I think that I would just urge that simple print approaches might work better, but I think it's really important to do that, and maybe to even have interpreters out there every once in a while so people can understand what's happening. So on to the things I've been wondering about. I want to say that I'm really happy to see all of the lower Manhattan parts of the project at least unified, both in terms of how they relate to each other and how they relate financially and in time. So that's a step forward. I'm just wondering, does the city have a master plan where the lower Manhattan piece fits into a larger picture planned by the city that includes the harbor and the rivers, so that we kind of know how this affects, for example, the Brooklyn side and the Long Island Queens side of this larger regional question. So that's a kind of general concern I have. How does Lower Manhattan fit into a larger picture of what the city is planning and what the state and region is planning for addressing climate change?
Great, I can take that. So it's Fantastic question. There are a couple different ways that folks are approaching this. I'll say the first, imagine many of you are familiar with the HATS, the Harbor and Tributary study that the Army Corps is leading. Many of you know that was paused at some point during the prior federal administration. That the new administration has restarted that work. And they are working towards releasing what they call a tentatively scheduled plan this summer. It will be a kind of an indication of the direction that they are going in terms of their different alternatives. Some involve kind of giant harbor barriers, some on land measures, and that is a process that we are working very closely with the Corps on. We've had a number of meetings specifically on the work going on in FIDI Seaport as well as the rest of LMCR, so they're intimately aware, and that's working in conjunction. In terms of the city, there's also an effort that's called Adapt NYC, relating to a bill that a council passed last year, trying to address this specific question of how are all these resiliency projects working together. And I believe that is set to be due out in the fall. So a couple different approaches, but all getting at the kind of question that you're getting at in terms of how this work interacts with the broader citywide effort.
So I just wanted to say about that there's just been a recent federal report that has pointed out that Lower Manhattan happens to be an area that has one of the highest impacts in North America to sea level rise, and that we can expect by 3032, which is what are we now? We're 2022. Within the next decade, we're to expect 3 to 4 instances of significant flooding in the Battery Park City area, according to these studies. So my view is that what's happened, I've been doing this for a decade and been involved with this for a decade. I've been working closely with the Army Corps of Engineers. What happens is that the planning and work that's happened in Lower Manhattan is the product of huge planning and spending. But if you're in Red Hook, you say, and I'm confronted sometimes by civil servants and council members, and they say, well, how come they're spending all that money in Lower Manhattan and doing nothing for us? So that the money that's being spent on planning for us isn't being spent in other parts of the city, and none of their planning is as advanced, but they deserve to have it as advanced as ours is. That's my concern there.
I guess just quickly, in terms of that study, our office works closely and actually convenes the New York panel on climate change. It is essentially a downscaled version of, folks are familiar with the IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change. So, studies come out every day at this point. I agree with the kind of battery in particular is at risk. But the benefit of working with NPCC is they do the work, they take all these studies and come back to us with kind of best assessment of what to be planning for. And so that process led, I believe the last report came out in 2019. Another is the next version is coming out, I believe next year. But I think the sentiment is a good one. And when we're working with the smartest academic minds in the region to decipher all the data that comes in.
Another question is the prior administration, one of the things that happened in order to get FEMA money and various types of federal paybacks, there was a concern with having complete projects. First there was this shovels in the ground phase, and we barely met that. And then there was a completion phase. Am I right about that? And has the city caught up with holding on to that money, or however that worked with the relationship between federal money and the city?
Not quite following the question. If it relates to the spending after Sandy money in particular.
I think so. I think there was a huge amount, a very substantial amount of money, and I remember watching all these meetings where there was a question about whether or not the shovels were in the ground, whether or not the projects would be completed in time, and I was wondering if there was follow-on that.
Got it. Okay, so I think the project in particular relates to some of the money in the BMCR project that has actually received a couple of extensions. First, a 1 year, and then most recently, I believe earlier this year, received a 2-year extension. And so we will be able to spend down and advance that project without risk of losing any of those funds. So yeah, we feel more than confident with this. You know, we had originally asked for a 3-year extension. We weren't granted it in the prior federal administration, and then so kind of made sure that request was made whole, and now advancing BMCR full speed to make sure that we don't have to give any federal money back.
Thank you. I'm going to move on
Thank you.
to David Sheldon.
There we are. And I will be brief. First, I want to say I'm very heartened to listen to what I'm hearing once again about advancing maritime use of the waterfront in the Seaport FIDI area, despite the fact that I'm still looking at the same rendering that seems to be there to defend against any ship coming abreast of the shore. It is only a rendering after all. I do want, on a positive note, to ask, how can members of the maritime community participate in this ongoing planning process? Us boat people. Because trust me, the waterfront does not look the same from the water as it does from the shore. Anyone can answer. How do we do it?
Jordan, you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Yeah, why don't you take this one? I know, imagine Blake and
Sure.
Elijah.
So for the FIDI Seaport, that whole plan, which we're just proceeding to 30% design, right? We are embedding, we actually just went through several interviews of bringing on engagement consultants. And so we're in the process now of choosing a firm whose really sole purpose is going to be around engagement of communities, and I think we put them through a pretty friendly but very direct interview process. And Blake, if I don't know if you want to chime in, but we really pressed on all the different stakeholders, all the different constituencies, language access, neighborhoods, large group meetings, small group meetings, virtual, in person. So you're going to see quite an extensive engagement process as we start ramping that up. Blake, do you have a sense of what that timeline's going to be?
Actually, could I ask quickly, how,
sorry,
I suppose this is why you hire a consultant, but how would you go about reaching out to the maritime community, since it is rather dispersed?
Sure. This is Elijah Hutchinson. So in the design itself, we totally hear you. We want to maximize those maritime opportunities wherever possible. And with this next phase of design work, we'll be able to look at what types of maritime uses are most appropriate where within the project area, acknowledging there's lots of different types of vessels and passenger traffic that's already there, and also hearing that people probably want to have answers on recreational or other type of small craft, and think through that within the design, the maritime strategy piece. We are still, coming up and formulating what our engagement process will be for next steps. That's actually one of the things we are excited to talk to you all about as we get into some of the more detailed work plans for each one of these work streams. But we, typically we go to the harbor ops community. We talk to the security, boat people, the FDNYs, the NYPD. We also operate the New York City ferry system. So we have our own, both the in-house maritime planners as well as the operators, Sea Streak, Homeblower, et cetera, that we can speak to about our future plans and terminal designs. And then we also very closely coordinate with DOT and their maritime group with the largest passenger ferry system in the United States operating within the study area. So the maritime aspects of this are critical, and it's why it's one of the special areas that were identified in Blake's presentation earlier of one of the key things that we hope to focus on with this next piece and really integrate that into the more detailed design.
May I respond?
Sure.
And again, I don't want to take up the rest of the evening with this, but just listening to that, it appears to me that that is a very significant slice of maritime use, but it also emits a tremendous portion of great significance. And while I think it would be easy, well, you would certainly have to consult with those groups. It would be remiss not to, but I think you're leaving a lot out. And that's where I think engagement at this stage would be helpful.
Sure. Sure. I'm not sure which groups you're
How
referring
about
to.
Tall Ships America?
Okay. No, we're happy to take, if you have any specifics, that's really helpful.
Well, that's the point. How do we engage you with these specifics outside of this meeting?
We we haven't started our engagement process for this next phase yet. So we're just introducing this right now, but absolutely, if you have specific names or even organizations of people that could benefit from a briefing, we're happy to follow up.
Okay, how do I get those to you?
David, you can email me. I'm going to put my email in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
But Elijah, hi. Thanks very much, and thanks, David, for the question. But just as follow up, I had this question myself, which is precisely, I guess you're not at the point to identify what and how this community feedback is going to take place for the future programming and design decisions coming down the pike. Is that correct? You're going to elaborate on that later as to how that will take place, or is that something you can tell us tonight in terms of how are you going to involve the community going forward?
Yeah, sure. We want to do that as a follow-up where we talk more specifically about the different phases and the types of questions we'll be answering, the types of technical analysis we'll be doing. And this is just, one piece that we're talking about maritime here, but we are going to have to do the same thing for, energy and sustainability. We're going to have to do the same thing for the tie-ins. And I think we're going to want to design an engagement process that works for you all and also works for the Climate Coalition as well, and kind of reconvene them in July is our current goal. So that's really the substance of what we don't want to design something in a vacuum. That's a process that probably wouldn't work for you all. So we still need to bring you into that process as well.
So we should hear a little bit more about that in July before the board closes in August. Is that right?
I'll say our goal was to have an actual CCL, like a little mini, CCLM meeting by July if we can pull that off. But yeah.
Great. Thanks a lot. Okay. Rosa Chang.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. So thank you very much for taking on this critical, essential, and enormously urgent work of resiliency. I know it's definitely a handful. And I also want to thank the team for the South Battery Park City tour, because that was awesome. I learned a lot, and I think that it would be great to have more of those actually. And that if we can sort of get that word out, I thought that was a really great way for people to understand, like a layperson to understand what is going to be happening and why it's going to be happening. On the presentation, I was concerned because you had mentioned staging and that would be sort of shown in a future presentation. But we're already really, as a neighborhood, super concerned about the park space that we are going to lose along our entire perimeter for the years that this work is going to be going on. And of course, the areas that you're talking about specifically relate to the areas of construction. But if the staging is not going to be included in those areas of construction, then my concern is that the little bit of park space that we have left outside of those areas are actually also going to be taken over for the staging of those projects. So that in fact we will have pretty much nothing left at all. So I guess that was concern number one. Concern number, should I just run through these, or do you want to answer them and then I'll continue?
Why don't you run through them unless I think it might be easier for them to take it as a group.
Okay, cool. Number two is I also noticed on the slide that the security area for the Statue of Liberty ferry is still going to stay in front of Castle Clinton. And I was wondering, as you've heard before, is there any possibility of moving that either into Pier A or somewhere else? I mean, I feel like it does an enormous disservice, frankly, to Castle Clinton as a landmark and to the experience of the view overall for anybody that's in the park. And I believe that had been the request of Worry. So that was another question. Third question was, has there been any further analysis on whether or not we would be able to integrate underground parking into the FIDI Seaport Resiliency Project in the areas where you are going to be building up 15 to 18 feet and planning to sort of fill that with clean fill instead of clean fill, whether or not there's the ability to integrate parking for all of the NYPD and DOT vehicles, of which we have an enormous plethora in our community, and specifically in that area, to sort of get them off of our streets and somewhere, bury them essentially under, some grass, which would be really lovely for our community and our neighborhood and our streets experience. So that was it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosa. I guess you've got questions to each one of you.
Alice, I'm happy to start.
Great, thanks,
Ben. And thank you for acknowledging our pre-construction site tours at the South project. I think it was something that was very helpful. And as noted at the time of those tours, they related to, specifically, although we toured the entire site, they related specifically to the construction that is going to be starting this summer at Wagner Park, the Museum of Jewish Heritage area, that being the first stage, the first phase of what we're doing. The Pier A Plaza and Battery work and the interior drainage will be following on a few months later. So we do anticipate that as we get closer to the commencement of that part of the project and have a greater sense of the staging associated with that phase, we will be doing another tour or two, pre-construction tour or two, that relate specifically to the Pier A Plaza and Battery work. So watch over the next couple of months, and we'll be doing another tour, maybe another couple of tours there. With respect to the second question about Pier A, just wanted to give seems like kind of a continuing update that Battery Park City Authority is continuing to work to resolve the occupancy and the legal rights associated with the existing sublease for Pier A, which is taking a little while to reach conclusion, and so are not in a position to actively entertain another use at the moment. But certainly Battery Park City Authority remains open and receptive to working with anyone at National Park Service or the city to an end if in fact that's something that there's an interest in doing. We're certainly open to conversation about that.
Jordan, you've got the underground parking maybe, or I don't know who.
Oh, okay.
I think Elijah's going to take that one. But yeah, let's Jennifer take this. Yeah.
Yeah, on the LMCR battery staging, as Gwen said, that's still, in development from BPCA side, and we're trying to work out a way to coordinate both the BPCA project and the EDC Parks project within the park so that that is minimized. And we definitely hear you. One of our goals is to make sure that we are not taking up the entire park, and that we have a safe operation also for trucks to move within the park during construction activities. So that is our goal as well, and we hear you.
Hi, this is Elijah too, to talk about parking a little bit. So one thing that's so incredibly important for the design of what we were able to do is what are the core design drivers for the project. And one of the big pieces there is the in-water footprint and how far we are going out into the water. And for that process and that design, which gets permitted by the state and federal government, we have to justify every single inch that we are going into the water, so that we aren't kind of causing environmental impacts or adding shading over the water or removing water column from the water to the greatest extent possible. And so a use like parking would, while we're going to be investigating multiple programming options and looking at all sorts of topside programming ideas, would come into conflict with the infrastructure, the subsurface infrastructure, the piles that need to go, dozens of feet below ground, and the flood walls that are going to be buried underneath this project. And so we would effectively be adding space of the project and other considerations like cost and complexity for something that is not core to the resilience goals of the project, but also we wouldn't be able to get an approval from a permitting agency or regulator for that kind of non-water dependent use in the coastal infrastructure process in the project. So I just don't think that it's going to be feasible for parking to be integrated within the structure on the underside. While I, think that we can look at other programming options, I think that one itself is going to be very, very challenging.
Just to be clear, though, I'm not saying that you should go even one single inch out further into the water to put in parking, because that would just be crazy. What I'm thinking more about is along the lines of in your documents where you have indicated that there would be 15 to 18 feet of clean fill that goes on top of the structural components, that rather than 15 to 18 feet of clean fill, that may be an area that you could actually just have parking. So I'm not saying go out further. I'm saying just in the areas that you are planning to go out already to perhaps have, parking
Sure.
instead of clean fill. So, and I also know that in your documents, you did indicate that you do need to have emergency vehicles and service vehicles within proximity to the site to be able to address any issues that may arise. And so this seems like it would be a conforming use for what you need to have happening there, as well as just frankly be something that would be nice and helpful to the community generally, because we have so much placard parking issues specifically in this area. Well, and I'm a little biased because I also want to move the DOT vehicles out from underneath the Brooklyn Bridge, but that's a whole other thing.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. And I think too, and we can continue to get into some of the details in this. I know, I can hear Alice, but it's not just clean fill that we're putting there. They're caissons that are these cylindrical structures that are completely encased in, hopefully some eco concrete or something a little bit more sustainable, that then we then have like flood walls that are buried underneath that fill, right? So if you could imagine an 18-foot mound, it's not like that's not just a mound of fill. That is a engineered structure of flood wall that has a certain width and certain access requirements, certain inspection requirements to make sure that it can be operated and maintained safely. And um, and there just doesn't seem to be that much flexibility to accommodate that level of like a parking facility and the turning, radii and other things that are needed for just kind of safe parking design. And anything that is if you look at the scope and scale of parking garages, even in the area, there's not one that neatly fits inside of a buried flood wall for a shoreline extension that's supposed to be absolutely minimized. So we will, I think it's intriguing. It definitely is, and we want to answer your questions. So there's probably more detailed stuff that we could do around this, but I'm just giving you my off the cuff kind of suspicions about the ways in which that probably wouldn't work.
Okay, thank you. I very much appreciate it. I will keep pushing.
Okay.
Thanks, and thanks for keep pushing, Rosa. Okay, we've got 3 more people, one of whom is our fearless chair. I just want to thank the people that were holding on. Many of them had to go for the Manhattan Detention Complex, no small part of our agenda tonight. But those of you who are still standing by, we should be finishing up shortly. So thank you. And Tammy, take it away. Diana.
Tammy, I'm so sorry. I've left you as an attendee. I will unmute you and then I'll move you over.
And then we have 2 more after Tammy who are attendees, and then we will close this out.
Hi, thanks so much, Alice. I did want to ask I realize I have to practice what I preach. Camera on. I did want to ask very specifically, I hear what you're saying about the parking garage, but there is waterborne uses that we are really looking to move forward to when we look at the future for Lower Manhattan. And one of them includes last mile delivery. The fact is not lost on us that so many items are containered on container ships into the port, unloaded, put in trucks and truck beds, and then trucked around the city. So we're looking for EDC and leadership in New York City to reinvent how we look at deliveries in New York City for more waterborne uses. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to us that a shipping container is taken off a ship to be put on a truck when it could be put just as well on some type of an electric ferry or ferry in general, and then ported over to Lower Manhattan, thus saving ourselves a lot in congestion. So I encourage you to think expansively when you're talking about waterborne uses to include some last mile delivery, which would then encompass with an ability to have some sort of underground structures that would be able to facilitate last mile delivery. And whether that's with electric vehicles or bicycles or whoever that may be, but some kind of a distribution path and method that incorporates all of the things that we're looking at.
Thanks, Tammy. I don't know if anyone wants to make a comment or response. Stopped them in their tracks. Do you want? Did you want some engagement on
Tammy,
that?
this is John Matera in the DOT Borough Commissioner's office. I work for Ed. We've met. We have an office of freight mobility. I think maybe this group isn't the best place. Maybe we can speak to you in a different venue. But I mean, yes, certain things like that do exist in other places. Rotterdam, places in Ireland, things like that, and we can work with EDC to consider creative uses. I was involved in the IKEA project in parks in Brooklyn, and what IKEA told us at the time was that like the way the container works is that it's filled with the whole country's worth of one desk, and they need to bring it to a sorting facility, and then every single truck gets driven back to IKEA, even though there's a container terminal directly next to the IKEA. It's just international shipping. But there have been things exactly the way you described, and we can talk more about it with EDC or you.
Yeah, we are delighted to be a part of those. We really would like to transform how we look at business in the city overall and how we're going to look in the future. We can't possibly claim to do something for climate change and for resiliency measures if we're not taking care of some of the root causes of where we are today. And that in itself is a big part of the package. I understand and hear what EDC says about it has to be resiliency related. I can't say anything more than climate change, fumes, and everything else is all resiliency related. So yeah, we'd be delighted to talk to you about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. And thanks, John. Okay, so we have 3 people and then we're going to close this out. So Brittany, you're up.
Hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Alice. And thanks for the presentation. I actually have a statement from Kelly McGowan that I was going to read and then make my comment. Is that okay? Can I read on someone else's behalf?
Yes, it's fine. I assume it's going to be under 2 minutes or I'm going to cut you off.
Do I get 2 for him and 2 for me?
No, I think we have, okay, whatever. Just go ahead. We'll do the best we can.
He says, I would like to make 3 main points while acknowledging that substantial work and effort have gone into the planning. Number 1, this project design is ill-conceived and unnecessary. The community does not need a new massive building occupying even more of our precious outdoor activity space. Wagner Park was already designed to be a high water protection and proved so in Sandy. Without a completely integrated citywide design, it will accomplish nothing except make the highest points higher and an exorbitant impact to the quality of life in the neighborhood. Number 2, while it makes sense to act, I take exception to the false sense of urgency. This design is supposed to protect for events that may occur over the coming decades and centuries. Doing it right is far more important than rushing to accomplish a self-imposed and isolated date. Number 3, the process has been woefully inadequate on community engagement. While proper legal steps may have been filed, they have been at best following the letter over the spirit. The community has had far too little exposure or feedback on design to be considered genuine. With these, now is the time to pause and reset this project to learn the lessons of the Lower East Side Resiliency Project and from past BPC projects. And then my statement, what I would like to say is I agree with what Kelly's saying, and I agree with everything Wendy said earlier when she said that the community, when they wake up, they do not know what's coming. When they wake up, it will be very similar to Rockefeller. I also have interviewed many people standing around down in Wagner who have no idea what's coming. So there's 2 key things that I think need to be considered. Number 1, the process and how the decision's made. Walks and signage need to come before decisions are made. Community feedback and showing them what it's going to look like and what's going to happen has to happen before to get meaningful input that goes into the designs. That's number 1. Number 2, on the designs, no one thinks resiliency is not critical. Everyone knows climate change is real. Everyone knows Lower Manhattan and many parts of New York are at risk. But the design principle of Wagner Park to increase commercial space by 4 to 5 times seems like a ploy to maximize revenue rather than address climate change. Our big problem in this area is not enough active green space. I was on the phone with the board of Downtown Soccer League today, who said they're at maximum enrollment and there's not enough places for kids to play soccer. So I would like a reassessment of the design plans of why do we need to tear down and reconstruct a building? Is there another way? Is there a way to increase active green space? Is there a way, if you have to carve up the parks, make a new park? More parks, not think about ways to add dining. And the last thing I want to say is when you go back and look at the design principles of this project, one was to increase food and dining. This came from a survey in 2016 that was done and published on the BPCA website, where they interviewed 414 people About 35% of them do not live in Battery Park. They were visitors, whatever. 31 people of that said they would like more food and beverage options. And from that became one of the main design principles. And when I look through past acts, it's one of the top design principles of this project. And in that same survey, when people are asked what they like best about Wagner Park, they say the quality of the park environment, great views, programming, and retail offerings. So I think going back and revisiting the design principles and the design of this project is very, very critical. And I think more community engagement on what those design principles are and bring it out and let them know and actually take meaningful feedback from the community before moving forward. Thanks, Alice, for giving me more time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brittany, for bringing this up. I don't know if Gwen wants to respond or anyone else that's representing the Battery Park City Authority or not.
I'm happy to respond. I appreciate the thoughts that were shared. I don't think that several of them are accurate. I stand totally behind our community engagement process that has gone on for 3.5 years with this project and a couple of years in the project before, which is where I think that maybe that survey result came from, not from the current project. Certainly the objective of this project is not in any primary way been to expand commercial space or to increase revenues. It has been driven, as has been reiterated numerous times by our president, BJ Jones, by resiliency. Everything that we're doing and have considered doing with respect to this project has been driven by the prime objective of achieving resiliency. And I think I'll leave it there.
Okay. I've got two more. Well, all right, let's just take these two. Jay Hellstrom. Hi, Jay. Jay, are you there? Not hearing you.
Jay's unmuted, but if his audio isn't working, Jay, you can chat your question to the host and I'll read it out for you.
Okay, so we'll go on to Casey while we wait for Jay to provide that. Casey, are you available? Okay, we seem to be having trouble there.
Let's give Casey one moment. Casey, are you there?
Hello?
There we go.
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm calling about the third bullet point in the agenda about the funding and independent environmental.
Yeah, Casey, we're gonna
Okay.
take that next. So
Okay,
we will
great. All
open
right.
that up and thank you for your patience. I'm terribly sorry we had such a full agenda.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
so
thought
we'll
we're
take you.
going to end the call, so I was trying to raise my
No,
hand before.
no.
Okay,
We
okay.
okay.
Got
So
it.
Jay, are you available or? Okay.
Let's try Jay one more time. I haven't gotten anything in the chat, but we'll try him one more time. Jay, I just sent you a unmute request.
Oh,
I did.
oh, there.
Hi. Did I make it?
We can hear you, Jay.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I have two. One, thank you for working on the Rubik's Cube. It will go on. So my two areas for further discussion and development. My first is, I think there has to be an analysis living on the East River as opposed to the Hudson, with the significant difference in timing and approach and the process as to why this has been allowed to happen and how you will basically catch up. Because if I am knowledgeable with water, it doesn't wait, it comes unilaterally across all areas. I think we have to have a deep discussion of why we are lagging in the FIDI Seaport area on these significant issues. Two, I think it is exceedingly important that there be financial analysis associated with the underlying development of these projects and the alternative A and B, because money will flow. And I think we have to have some significant understanding of the smokestacks as opposed to the flow of money between these three segments of our lower Manhattan. Thank you very much, Alice, and all the members. I appreciate and look forward to having a response to these.
Thanks very much, Jay. Do we want to have a response?
Yeah, maybe I'll take the second part of that, and Elijah, getting a little feedback here, but maybe Elijah can jump in on the hydrodynamics piece. Yes, I think the urgency is real for us, as it relates to funding and financing of the FIDI Seaport project. We have been able to secure city funds for portions, right? We talked about the kind of the Seaport project moving forward, kind of the latest piece of this. But the challenge is immense. This is a $5 to $7 billion project. There is currently very few opportunities at the federal level to support this work. There's the Army Corps Civil Works program, which is maybe the largest kind of set of available funds. There are those kind of smaller grant opportunities that we are applying for, BRIC, HMGP, et cetera. But those are kind of at like a $50, $100 million scale. So that is work that we're going to be continuing to do in this next phase of work, and kind of Arcadis kind of next set of work with them. But agree with the urgency. The city alone cannot take on this challenge, and so this will likely need to be a partnership with the state and federal government to make sure that we can push this over the finish line. And yeah, Elijah, do you want to take the hydrodynamics question?
Sure. I guess I think it was a hydrodynamics question, but it was about water flowing and it being uniform. But one thing that we look at within the work here is the specific ways in which water actually differs in its nature and flow across our study area. And we look at that in very localized ways through creating models that simulate both the current conditions and look at future changes in tidal flow as climate change happens, but then also the impact of our project on water velocities and how that profile of water changes as you do work in water. One way in which the FIDI Seaport area is different than the others is this in-water component, which means that it requires a lot more coordination with our state and federal government on actual implementation, and getting the approvals to be able to do this kind of work means going to agencies like the Army Corps and the Coast Guard and the State Department of Environmental Conservation, the fisheries and habitats groups and others. So there is a little bit of also a different planning and implementation context for from FIDI Seaport that does affect timeline. But we even looking at the hydrological profile and the hydrodynamics of this waterfront, the water behaves differently even as you get to the southern part of our study area near the ferry terminals. If you were to compare that to say more northern, like near Montgomery Street where BMCR is, and a lot of that is because of wave intensity and the wave impacts, because you have air is able to travel along a large harbor, and lower Manhattan is the first thing that it hits, and so the level of protection, the way the impact of those forces is actually kind of unique to that area in some ways, and so we have to take into account all of these very nuanced ways in which water does behave differently in our study area to make sure we design a project that doesn't have negative impacts or produce scour on really important infrastructure, or does it impact maritime activity so that we can continue to have ferries here, for example, or can support certain ecologies or habitats, which is another thing for why we try to look at to understand water as much as possible.
Wow. Well, there's certainly a lot of more information for some more deeper diving, if you will, going forward on all of this. It's immense. And I thank you and the team. I just had one question for the Battery Park City Authority, just because it's imminent. You have a public hearing. I just want to, for the record, let everybody know again, what is that, Thursday, May 19th, public hearing on the draft environmental impact statement. And I have to say that we at the board feel that the 11 days, if we're counting, is just not adequate for us to review the 419-page document, though I applaud Claudia for getting through it in 3 minutes, but as a summary. But I do feel as if that just is not fair. I think generally we get 30 to 45 days. I thought that was even a requirement for some of this, but I'm not quite sure why we couldn't have until the end of the month, but June 3rd seems having a public hearing on the 19th and then going forward to have our responses by June 3rd seems a tad short. So I just leave this as food for thought to consider our request for a slightly more fair period of time to review this. I'm sure you're going to want to hear what the community has to say on it. So if you could put that in the hopper and get back to us on those thoughts. I guess I'm pointing to Gwen on this one. And I don't know if anyone else has anything else to say to close out, but I just want to thank you all very much. It's fascinating, and I'm delighted to have you all presenting, as I think Bob Schneck pointed out, together in the same room, sort of, is really fantastic. And it's really the beginning of, what we really need to see as a kind of global approach to all of this. I see Tammy does have her hand up, but that's going to be it, Tammy, because we have to move on to the next agenda item. But thank you all very, very much. Go ahead, Tammy.
My hand is up specifically to ask about the timing, which you mentioned for the environmental impact statement, and whether or not we will see from the Battery Park City Authority is there a revised plan that has drawings on it that we can see that could be sent publicly that show either an addition of a bike lane, removal of the storage facility outside, because we understood by the creation of this brand new space that all storage would be inside versus the composting that's still by the water, and what the final pathways and such, and whether or not an elevator would have been possible for the public to use to go up. Those were all outstanding questions, and I don't believe I've seen anything, and I will continue to support my objection that we got notification 1 week in advance of the public hearing, and I don't think that that is, for all the time and work and effort that we've all put in for this, I think it's a little short.
Okay, see if I can remember all of those things. The bike path is something that we are continuing to work with the Department of Transportation on for Battery Place. We do not have a final plan or approved plan for a bike path, but we are continuing, as we said we would, to work with the DOT to try to achieve that. The outdoor staging area is not it's a short-term staging area. It is not the same as the storage area. It's not the same as the maintenance facility that is being utilized in the lower level of the new pavilion. It is a means for the park's maintenance workers to have a place as they are working throughout the park to have their supplies temporarily located in one place so that they can easily access those supplies. That is still in the plan. And as we had indicated previously, it is very much out of view and out of the pedestrian access way for along the Esplanade and at the museum and the park. It does not obstruct any access on the part of pedestrians. What was the next one? What was the next point? I'm sorry, remind me.
The elevator.
There we do, as we have mentioned many times, and we have had a number of meetings that have dwelt very significantly on the question of whether or not an elevator in the pavilion leading from the street level to the park level was feasible, and have looked at many different ways of trying to achieve that, only to come to the conclusion that it is not feasible. And therefore the current design for the pavilion does not include a public elevator that leads from the street level to the park level. There was one more?
Well, I think that we both were pushing for the extension for the review past the 11 days. Is that something you could work on, Gwen?
As I've mentioned before, the time periods that we have utilized for both the hearing and the comment period. The comment period is 30 days. That is the prescribed period of time for comments on a DEIS. The notification was.
I'm sorry, what is the math on that? Because the hearing is on the 19th, so we're the 30 days.
Alice, if I could jump in, it started May 4th when it was posted. So it starts the day that it's posted through June 3rd. So May 4th through June 3rd.
I don't think the community board was notified till last week.
We came out on May 4th. Yeah, no, we saw that, but I think we did get it, but that seems awfully short still. And anyway, so am I hearing a no, or is this a possibility for further discussion?
I'm happy to discuss it. I'm not in a position to say yes to that.
Okay, so let's take it offline. And Tammy and we can take a look at that. And thanks very much, Gwen. So again, now I am going to close this piece of the agenda out. I'm sure you're all very sorry to finally get off the phone here at 9:03. Thank you very, very, very much for, a really interesting meeting, and obviously a lot more to come. And we look forward to a lot more engagement. I think that's key. You can hear it from what we've done in the past and where we're going in the future. The more of this, the better, I would say. So I think that's it. Thank you. And we're moving immediately on to the third and last item agenda.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
So onwards, the funding of an independent environmental monitor for the Manhattan Detention Complex project at 100 Center Street, also known as 124, 125 White Street. I have to apologize to all of you who got on quite early for this. We did not forecast quite as long on the first agenda item as occurred, but certainly very important, and interestingly underlines just how important the independent environmental monitor is on any one of these kinds of very immense development projects like we saw at 250 Water Street. I'm going to reverse the grouping of people to speak and actually ask people that the attendees who have patiently awaited, and many I think we've lost, want to speak up first. I know there were people that wanted to speak and had testimonies maybe in the community. I received one or two where somebody had to leave and asked if I'd be good enough to read it, and I'm happy to. But is there anyone else that is still online that wants to speak up? Okay, I see people coming. So our new community member who I can introduce tonight, I hope she joins my committee, Dr. Andrea, and I'm not sure the pronunciation, Jue, who is working at 139 Center Street, and I'm going to ask that she starts us off, and welcome Andrea to the Community Board 1. I understand that you are now a new member, if I'm not mistaken, I hope. Andrea's on? Oh, good, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, welcome.
Good evening. This has been a very informative meeting. My name is Andrea. I'm an ophthalmologist. My office is at 139 Center Street, directly across the street from the Manhattan Detention Center. Thousands of elderly patients who lack basic English fluency depend on my office for their medical needs. I'm here to be their voice. I've been at 139 Center Street since 2018, and there has been zero outreach to me from any city department regarding the demolition and construction planned at 124 125 White Street. The environmental impact of the demolition was only made public via FOIL from Community Board 1. The report completely ignored health implications and did not adequately provide a remediation plan for the thousands of patients who come on a daily basis to seek medical care from the hundreds of medical professionals at 139 Center Street, a de facto community medical center. My patients and my staff are afraid that the air that they breathe will be tainted with toxins and chemicals. They are worried that years of construction will render it unsafe for them to come to our building. What bothers me the most is that I cannot find reliable and adequate answers for them. When I see Gramercy Group cutting down all the trees and violating the written points of agreement, I wonder what else will be compromised. Will the health of the surrounding community also be sacrificed and become collateral damage in building the world's tallest jail? I would like an independent environmental oversight commission to monitor the air quality on a daily basis, just like what is being done at 250 Water Street, and to monitor the progress of all the demolition and construction to ensure the safety of all of Lower Manhattan. Based on what I've observed up to this point, I do not trust the city, I do not trust Gramercy Group to look out for us. A year ago, the mayor himself said, and I quote, "No new jail, no building up a jail at this location," end quote. Look at where we are now. There is no trust, and there has been no real community engagement. You know, I think the big elephant in the room when we're talking about environmental impact is, why are we destroying a fully functional facility? I think we all agree that Rikers is a terrible, terrible place. So why are we subjecting an additional 900 detainees to be held there for the next 5 to 7 years? Did anyone ask these detainees whether they would rather be in Rikers or continue to be here at the current White Street location, where they'd be close to the courts, to their family support systems, and the medical care? You know, I worked with Rikers detainees during my residency at Bellevue. I can assure you that the detainees treasured every single minute away from that place. And to continue to unnecessarily subject detainees to Rikers is unconscionable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for that excellent testimony, Andrea. I like you jumping in on the first day of your community board visit. Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head, and I appreciate the comment. Edward Cuccia? Welcome, Edward.
Congratulations. Andrea and I have worked together in the past. Congrats. Wonderfully said and well spoken. All right, folks, well, I'll keep it short. I've addressed this community board many times over my opposition to the jail, and specifically to environmental issues. My office is located at 121 Walker Street. I'm in the Chung Pak building. If there are poisons and all sorts of toxins that are going to leach out of this horrific, horrific project, I'm the canary in the coal mine, and I really don't want to be. So thank you for that, Gramercy, and Mr. Adams, and the City of New York. It's wonderful to be the canary. I would like to stress that I certainly strongly wish for an independent environmental testing. I think that's really important. We know that the City of New York has not been honest with us at all regarding this jail, regarding the past jails, the current jail. It's just been an awful situation, and I have no faith or trust in their promises. And speaking again as the canary, I urge desperately this committee to think about that. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Edward. We hear you. Don Lee?
Meeting. I'm a Battery Park City resident, and I grew up in Chinatown. So I witnessed firsthand all the jails and the borough-based jails that are in our community. I think want to make one clear distinction that Chinatown is not against a new jail. Chinatown is against replacing a fully functional jail. And I think the concept of getting oversight, it's a good one. Anything help is wonderful, But I think more importantly, we really need to be the voice for the detainees. I have helped many people who are incarcerated, wrongfully, and I think Rikers Place needs to be shut down. And right now, the federal government is asking the mayor's office for a plan. And I hope that the community board one will consider making a recommendation to both the mayoral president and the mayor that part of his plan is to reopen the current MDC. Just think about it. 900 beds. So right now, there are 900 individuals that are in Rikers that should not and do not need to be there. So that should be the plan to reopen this. Let's not just keep this De Blasio debacle going. Let's cut our losses. The most important thing, besides environment for everyone, is the detainees, and I really hope that I urge the board to raise issues about environmental concerns, but give a recommendation to the mayor. His plan should be to reopen the current MDC center and bring people back from Rikers to the local court world-based bail that's available right now. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Don. We are on record with looking very much pushing to see that alternative of reusing the existing buildings. So we very much hear you on that. Morton Minsley. Morton.
Hello?
Hi, Morton. Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I, like Dr. Dewey, I am also a new member of MCB1.
Exactly. Welcome.
Oh, welcome. That's fantastic. I'm sorry I didn't recognize your name. Welcome.
Okay. And I do want to echo and support Dr. Dewey and Mr. Cuccia and specifically in regard to the environmental concerns. My office, and I'm an attorney like Mr. Cuccia, my office is at 101 Lafayette Street, which is right next to 139 Center, where Dr. Dewey has her office, and around the back is the Manhattan Detention Center. And as far as the environmental concerns are concerned, I remember when my office and on 9/11 was at 125 Broadway, around the back from the ground zero of the World Trade Center. And at the time, people said, the environment was safe and everybody could go back to their office, and people in Battery Park City and downtown could go back to their apartments. And none of that was true. So I think that it's very important that there is an environmental monitor in place to monitor the construction, the demolition, to the extent that it goes forward. I would wish and hope that it wouldn't go forward. I think it's going to cause a severe disruption in the community in that area and in downtown Manhattan for an unforeseen period. But at least if it does go forward, there has to be very strict environmental monitoring. And as we see and just heard earlier regarding 250 Water Street, it has to be rigorously enforced. So that's what I have to say, and I support the request for an environmental monitor. Thank you.
Morton, thanks very much. Again, welcome, and thanks very much for coming tonight and speaking up. That was very helpful. I'm going to ask Casey, who came on earlier. I realized we overlooked. Casey?
Hi everyone. Hello, my name is Casey Wong. I'm the mom of two children. They're 9 and 7. We have been living in Lower Manhattan, Chinatown for years. And could we get some data on what is the environmental impact would be if we go forward with this, replacing the current jail with the 40-story tall jail in our neighborhood? That's like the size of the Statue of Liberty. I have two kids who love to go to Columbus Park, and we have to pass this big jail every time we would go to the park. And also, right near it, there's a child care center and a senior housing building right next to it. And could we please don't go forward with this big jail? And we need to spend $8 billion to build this jail, and the jail that we have is only 40 years some old, perfectly fine working jail. Could we, someone please help the community and just find a win-win situation in this very prompt matter? Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Casey, for coming and for speaking up. I encourage everyone here to write the mayor to the very concerns that you're describing. It wouldn't hurt. Okay, Doris Lang. Doris, hello, welcome.
Got the prompt to unmute. Okay, so my name is Doris Ling. I'm the founder of Safety for All New Yorkers. I was born and raised in Chinatown. I worked in downtown Manhattan, right by the jail, for 25, 30 years. And I'm here to say that there are many people who are voiceless in this process. They are the immigrants. They are the people without access because of language. And so those are the people who are going to be most affected. And particularly, just look at that block. That block, as somebody mentioned, has senior housing that will share a wall with the quote unquote new jail, as well as a daycare center and a healthcare center. The healthcare center services immigrants from all over the city. And so those people have had no voice in this, and they will be severely impacted. We ask every city resident to recycle. Why can't we recycle this building? It can be done. The architects say it can be done. The experts say it can be done. Why is it that we are going to spend $2.3 billion? I actually wrote out that number. That's a lot of zeros. It's just impossible to comprehend how many zeros and how many people are basically contributing to building the tallest jail in the world. We don't need. We can get the same number of beds. We can use the money for programming. Wearing another hat, I actually have helped prisoners as part of a not-for-profit, and we were in Rikers, and we were fully funded by Pinkerton. And in the fourth year, they asked the city to put up some money, the fifth year. And the city said, sorry, we can give you maybe something like 20,000. Meanwhile, it was a program that helped the inmates. There was a 2% recidivism rate. That means 98% of the inmates who were part of this program never came back to jail. And they actually found a new way of life. And everybody was satisfied. The inmates were satisfied. Everybody was satisfied. But the city basically nickel and dimed. And instead of building something shiny and new, what they really need to do is look at ways to help people in prison that is productive and long-term. We can build something shiny and new, but that will not mean that ultimately people will be helped. So I would say that it's so important, particularly to not build the jail, but also if the jail goes through, that we have an independent environmental monitor. And as I indicated, all those people on that block are going to be severely impacted, particularly the seniors and the young people. And we have not really taken into account the effect that COVID has had on the surrounding neighborhood, on the inhabitants, on the residents. And I also note that many in the neighborhood suffer through the collapse of the World Trade Center. And so we really don't know the full extent that they've been impacted in terms of their health and COVID on top of that. This is something that really is uncharted territory, and we need an environmental monitor to make sure that people's health stay in a positive way. So for that reason, the other thing is actually somebody mentioned this in relationship to another project. When we talk about climate change fumes, to demolish 2 functional buildings means that not just the dust, but all that debris has to be taken out, and it's going to be taken out through the bridge or the tunnel because it's not staying in Manhattan. There are no landfills in Manhattan. All those dump trucks are going to be spewing lots of pollutants all over Manhattan. And so when we talk about doing something for climate change, we could start there. It would be ironic that we worry about resiliency project and all this other stuff. Meanwhile, we take perfectly fine, structurally sound buildings and destroy them, and releasing toxins and other things. And other people have talked about how digging into the ground may cause environmental hazards as well. So for that reason, I strongly support the idea of an independent environmental monitor, but ultimately, really, this jail has to be stopped.
Thank you so much, Doris.
Thank you.
Here. Okay, we have Howard Huey. Howard, are you with us?
Just a sec, Alice. It takes a moment.
Sure.
Howard, are
My
you
name
there?
is Howard Huey. I would urge CB1 to approve the independent environmental monitor because the Gramercy protocols for noise abatement, for asbestos and lead-based paint, their plans for mitigation is just a little bit too easy. We all know that when we do this massive deconstruction, that it's not going to be as easy as it sounds. The testimony from 240 Water Street just proves that out. So, I urge that we have an independent firm to verify that and to make sure that that the noise and dust all stay within limits, because if they are not, and I think that when the pressures to keep the timelines of the project, those protocols will get relaxed. And the only stopping them from affecting the people at Chung Pak and the old seniors there will be an independent monitor. So I think that's very important.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Howard. Very helpful to hear that. Okay, I think our last from outside the CB here is Nancy Kong.
Thank you, Alice, and thanks for all your work in trying to stop the jail and bringing up the concerns. I have 3 points. One is I would like to introduce a report that Eric Dillenberger had done in 2018-2019. He's a builder developer, and he is very familiar with the materials used in the current detention center as well as the tombs, and how harmful those particles are to humans, seniors, children, especially in our nearby area, since we are one of the most densely populated areas. He also did a study on the noise impact, but really more so the concern is the dust particles, the asbestos. These are fortified buildings. So it's not like taking down any old buildings. These are fortified. And I think the other issue was also, as we had discovered later on that from the EIS, was there are toxic materials underneath. So I fully support CB1's request for the independent monitoring. I would like to resubmit that report and have it made available for the public, because when the public reads it, it is frightening that we are living and playing and working so close by. All the concerns that have been mentioned tonight are validated by a professional. So I think it's critically important if CB1 could also help disseminate that report. The second item is, in all of our I've attended every single neighborhood advisory meetings, and today the city had said that they would resume these. These have not been conducted since, I think, 2021, September, October timeframe. And it is critical that they resume. I don't know what the obstacles are, but in that meeting, and we can also refer to the points of agreement that we had made, the community requested very specifically air, noise, traffic, everything, monitoring. So the environment, and in there was the independent environmental consultant that was requested very early on, that the city promised, quote unquote, that they would review, and they've never addressed it. So I think it's critical that we keep pushing for it. And I'm happy to also resubmit the summary of the points of agreement, the request from the community at that point, so that we're all clear. These are not new asks. These have been something the community has been bringing up since 2018. That's how long this fight has been. And I forgot the third thing, but those are it. And just thank you again, and Community Board 1 for all the work that you're doing to push this back. Thank you.
Nancy, I can thank you on a personal note. Nancy Kong has been a leader on this for years, and a very powerful and strong one at that. And so right back at you. Please do send along I do have the Dillenberger report, certainly, and go ahead and send along those points of agreement, if you don't mind, to the board, and that would be great. We'll get that stuff disseminated, certainly among the committee members, and we'll refer to it if everyone agrees in the resolution that's before us tonight, hopefully imminently. Delighted to see Megan Malvern here. I can't believe you've started and you're still here. Megan Malvern from Children First. And thank you so much for following this, Megan. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that is that any help that Children First can offer in our experience with working with the independent monitor, interviewing for an independent monitor, that was a very tricky circumstance, because guess what? People want to work for developers. They don't want to work for the community. It's a very, very, it's an uphill battle. But I would love to share the resources and the databases that we've compiled over the years of environmental resources that were the right people in the right place and doing the right things. And I just want to also reiterate, Community Board 1 is big, and we are really connected. I care deeply about the stuff that was happening at Seaward Park. I care deeply about Two Bridges. I care deeply about the jail, and we are all fighting the same fight. And I love that we're working together, and know that anybody who wants to reach out to me, I am there as a resource. And I appreciate CB1 for creating this really, really amazing network. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Oh, Megan, thanks so much. I see a million hands with little hearts clapping going on the screen, which I don't know if you see, but a lot of support for the group effort here. And we will certainly take you up on your offer to identify the sort of key aspects of whoever this monitor might be, but you could help us first figure out a way to fund it. But in any case, I think we're at a point where we're going to hear from our community board members, and then
Alice, sorry to interrupt. Nancy Kong has remembered her third point, and I'm going to unmute her so she can add that. Okay. And then we do have Don Lee also in the members of the public with a hand up.
Oh, I thought he went. Okay, sorry.
Apologies,
Nancy, are you
I
there?
remembered the third one. Thank you so much, Diana. It was really to have the independent monitoring, if we can get that to include an expanded area. I believe the city had said that they were going to just monitor within, like, I think even within the parameters of Columbus Park, but it actually has to expand out into the community. So I would just request if the resolution could also indicate, at least, I don't know what an appropriate area is, so I would ask you and Megan to maybe include that, just so that we have enough of the community covered. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, Nancy. Okay, I think I've seen hands going back up. So I guess these are repeats. Diana, is that what I'm
I
seeing?
have one more in the public, Don Lee.
Okay.
It's the last one that I have before our board members. Don, are you
Hi,
there?
thank you so much. I did speak earlier. I missed one point. The key point I want to make is that all of us are here supporting the resolution regarding the monitor, because it was proposed by elected official. It's a good one, I think, but ultimately it's important to highlight that this support for the monitor in no way represent our acceptance of this demolition and the building of the jail. We are absolutely think it's unnecessary, at least unnecessary. One last point is that in the last 3 days, the former commissioner of the Department of Correction and the deputy commissioner of correction has spoke out publicly in multiple press reports saying that the only way to fix this dysfunction is to change the culture. They make no mention of anything about a new building. And we are in support of the borough-based jail, and just make sure that, the mayor should consider part of the plan. And thank you so much again. It's just that our support for this proposal monitor does not represent in any way that we have accepted that the demo is the best solution. Thank you very much. We are against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. You can be assured this will be featured with bold in our resolution, given that we've now on record, I think, 3 different times stating our complete and strong opposition to the borough-based jail. Okay, I think, thank you so much for everyone from the community who hung in here till the wee hours. So I don't know if anyone from the community board has anything to say at this point. We have a resolution before us to support the elected's letter, which I assume everybody got a copy, or did they not? I don't know if it's in the chat.
I put it in the chat.
Okay, great. So this is a letter that was drafted by, I think it was Councilmember Marte's office, but it is signed by our Manhattan Borough President, our State Senator Brian Kavanaugh, Assemblymember Yulee New, and Gerald Nadler. So it's the all-star cast with the subject of the support for an independent community monitor for Manhattan Borough-based jail project. So we're certainly in support of this letter, and we will add certain pieces of information that were discussed tonight, unless somebody has an objection to some of the thoughts that were brought forth, like I don't know if we have to go through each and every one of them, but the attachment of the Dillenberg reports about the health and the need for this to go and of course in front of not just Commissioner Sagos of DEC, but our health commissioner, DEP commissioner, and the fact that we want to make it very clear that we're against the jail, of course, but if in fact this is going forward, this is a necessity. And I would ask that I'm going to look to specify in our resolution some of the aspects of this that are not really known or not really discussed, that are the actual environmental concerns at the site. So the petroleum bulk storage program which is a state which requires state review, DEC review, is something that will be triggered here. And asbestos abatement and removal also triggered here. That's something that is overseen by the New York State Department of Labor. So, and then the asbestos disposal is regulated by, again, the New York State DEC. So some people have said it's only a city regulated project, but in fact, it very much has state regulation involved with it. So that is something that we'll, identify specifically in the resolution. Are there other things that were not covered tonight, or that were that the committee wants to opine on? Otherwise, we probably will, start to massage this. Yeah, anybody? Sorry, somebody talking?
Vera's got a hand up.
Vera, yes.
Hey, yes, hi. Let's not forget what Nancy
I want
said
to go
about
and see it. I love eating mom.
expanding the area of the monitoring, and also we wanted to have daily monitoring as well. And the other thing, based upon what we've heard from 250 Water Street, is if any of the monitoring is, there should be something that says that if the monitoring is faulty or whatever, there should be an immediate stop in the project of itself, so that it does not continue and go forward until that gets addressed.
Absolutely.
And there's also been an NYU Langone report that was part of our initial, the part of the NUVC initial Article 78 lawsuit that indicated that the seniors were extremely sensitive and prone to noise, and that could lead to their early demise. And so I would like that also to be a part of this resolution. So I'll get a copy of that for you as well too.
Yeah, I think I have that, and absolutely, if the committee doesn't object, I think that's a very good idea. I also know that we've spoken about at an earlier time, and I think we're already on record on this, so we should definitely reiterate it, that the community air monitoring plan would include well, Marte's letter is asking for a monthly update, but that the community air monitoring goes on daily. So this should be somehow made available to the public, much as it is at 250 Water Street, through some sort of website that could be on our own website, that we are given or provided a way to see the daily plan, you know, what has occurred every day. And additionally, that we push for not quarterly updates, which is what DDC is providing or says they will provide, but rather at the minimum monthly at the CB EPC meetings. So that's something else that's come to mind. Obviously, all the aspects that are covered in his letter, we'll be covering. Are there other things that people are thinking of that we should identify at this point? We can, of course, add things, but as amendment, but anything else?
Alice, there's also, it's Vera again, I'm sorry, but I believe that asbestos abatement is actually ongoing right now. And so it is rather urgent. We really need to have some sort of independent monitoring of this right now.
Yep, very good point. Absolutely. Anything else? Does anyone have an objection to this resolution for the independent environmental monitor for the Manhattan Detention Complex project? If anyone objects, raise your hand, speak up. Anybody want to abstain from this? Okay, I think it's does it look like we're all accounted for there, Diana?
Are there any recused? Okay, then it's unanimous.
Well, terrific. Many, many thanks to everyone involved here. What an evening. What an amount of stuff that we covered. I cannot thank you enough. And, you know, bravo to all of you. And, you know, good team. Go get a drink. Good night, all. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon. Take care. Thanks, Diana. Thanks, Wendy.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.